Good evening and welcome to the September 18th, 2023 Collingswood Public School meeting. Appropriate notice of this meeting has been advertised. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Here.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Henry?
Here.
Mrs. Maya?
Here.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Here.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Here.
Mrs. Sharon Celia?
Here.
Mr. Stotts?
Here.
Mrs. Caden?
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move into, there's no executive session at this time, and before we move into our presentations, in keeping with the spirit of the board also doing the work to become more culturally competent, we have a few announcements. To our Jewish community members, we say Shana Tova and Happy Sweet New Year. We also are in the midst of, thank you, Mr. Goldberg. We also are in the midst of Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. It began on Friday, September 15th to mark the anniversary of independence for Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Mexico's Independence Day is one day later on September 16th, and Chile's falls on September 18th. I'd like to take a moment to honor our Hispanic and Latinx students, staff, and families. Dr. McDowell has some more details on how this is being celebrated in our schools later on in the meeting. So with that being said, quite a pivot from celebrating some of the hallmarks of this month, but we have Mr. Joe Betley and Lauren Tedesco, who are going to give us a presentation on an ethics training for board members. Sorry, can you guys use the microphone? Otherwise, we're streaming and people will only hear a third of what's being said. Thanks.
Just go to the first slide, please. So this type of training is required. It's required by state law, which mandates the training, and it's required during the first, second, and third years of your first school board term, and it's also required the first year of any reappointed term. So most of the time, someone's going to fall into one of those categories, so you're going to do it annually. School ethics is comprised of the School Ethics Act, the Code of Ethics, and conflicts of interest. These are the three main laws and main statutes that cover school board member ethics. The School Ethics Act, it applies to all board members, employees or officers of the New Jersey School Boards Association, and school administrators such as the superintendent and business administrator. The Prohibited Acts section is contained in the School Ethics Act and addresses conflicts of interest. The Code of Ethics is contained in the School Ethics Act and only applies to Board of Education members. And the Ethics Act is enforced by an entity called the School Ethics Commission, or the SEC. The School Ethics Commission is a 9-member body. They are appointed by the governor. They have 3-year terms. It's kind of run like a board of ed. There are 2 school board members, 2 school administrators, and 5 non-school officials. What do? They issue advisory opinions, receive ethics complaints, conduct investigations, and hold hearings. The School Ethics Act is intended to ensure that the conduct of school officials holds the respect and confidence of the people. School officials must avoid conduct which is in violation of their public trust or which creates a justifiable impression that such public trust is or may be violated. And any person can file a complaint alleging a violation of the School Ethics Act or Code of Ethics by a board member or school administrator. Generally, those who file school ethics complaints are usually either members of the public or it could be a board member against another board member. Those, I would say, are probably the most common. So complaints and advisory opinions. It's important to note that a Board of Education as a whole cannot file a school ethics complaint against one of their members, let's say. So they can't resolve to file as a whole. An individual member, however, could file a school ethics complaint. The SEC is the entity which determines whether there is in fact a violation of the School Ethics Act or the Code of Ethics. And you can also request what's called an advisory opinion, which is where you think you perhaps may have a conflict and it's not fleshed out in case law or anything yet, or in the School Ethics Act, and you can apply to the School Ethics Commission and ask about your circumstances, and then they issue a written advisory opinion back. So that's really good to get a perspective on any prospective issues that you think you might have. Violations of the Act can result in reprimand, censure, suspension, or removal. And any of this would be determined by the School Ethics Commission and then recommended to the commissioner of the School Ethics Commission. I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
I'm going to do a tag team this afternoon, this evening. Again, any board members, if you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free to ask them, and we give out free wills and states from Cape Horn statute if you're able to stump the lawyers with those particular questions. No, we can't do that because that's ethics violation. And for the members of the public, this really is for the Board of Education. If there's any questions after the presentation, we'll be glad to stick around and answer those questions. One thing I wanted to add about the comment about reprimands and so forth. If one of the board members think that another board member did something wrong, they cannot do their own reprimand. They cannot do their own censure. You cannot really punish your own board members for something that you believe they did wrong. You have to go to the School Ethics Commission. They really have the exclusive jurisdiction, we call it as lawyers, to issue any type of discipline against school board members for violations of those acts. So I wanted to add that as well. So this is indemnification. If, of course, none of our clients ever get involved in any type of wrongful action as board members, but if something does occur where a board member, a complaint is filed against you for violation of the School Ethics Act, you are entitled to indemnification as a board member, just like any other staff member would be if some type of action is brought against a staff member for doing whatever, negligence and so forth. You are indemnified is the legal term for it, where a lawyer would represent you and handle that particular allegation before the School Ethics Act. Unless you, at the bottom thing, unless there's some type of egregious violation as a school board member, where it's completely outside of your realm as a board member, then there would be no indemnification of that particular action. Again, few and far between, very rare. We have seen it in a few instances. So, but you are entitled to that indemnification. Thank you, Beth Ann. General powers of the Board of Education, as what you do on a weekly, monthly basis. You're supposed to enforce the rules of the State Board of Education that seem rather self-explanatory. You make and amend all your own rules governing yourself, your bylaws, how you conduct meetings, how you conduct committee meetings, things of that nature. You are in charge of that, and you perform everything that you're supposed to do under the law to make sure that this particular school district is run very well. You're here to come make sure that the students have what they need to get an education in Collingswood. Next one, please. Again, more general powers and duties of the Board of Education. Main thing here, first line, develop policies. You're a policy-making organization. You should spend most of your time developing those policies and stick by those policies. We're also here to approve the curriculum as recommended by the administration pursuant to the New Jersey standards. Obviously, you're here to adopt the budget. That takes up a lot of your time, we know that. Not a lot of conflict and school ethics violation decisions and so forth doing the budget. You really can't get into trouble from the School Ethics Act with doing the budget. A lot of the issues come up in other areas. Bottom line, you're supposed to hire the personnel for the district, but again, with those two asterisks, it's important that those particular hiring decisions must come from the recommendation of the superintendent. In this, again, wherever the superintendent is, they're the gatekeeper. They're the ones who are supposed to present candidates to you for the hire. You have the ultimate decision of whether to hire, but you have to rely upon the recommendation of the superintendent. If the superintendent comes to you with a candidate for whatever, and you say, no, we don't like that particular person, let's hire this person, or let's hire my neighbor, let's hire my cousin, and so forth. You can't do that. That's a violation. You come back, and no rubber stamp, you come back and say, hey, Dr. Brown, we don't like that particular person. Come to us with somebody who is that we are then comfortable with. But you can't go out and hire your own person. It has to come through the superintendent. You have to act as a whole. You individually have no power whatsoever in terms of being out in the community, being on the fields, promising this, promising that. You have no authority whatsoever as an individual. The only authority you have to do anything to this district is when you're meeting here as a whole, as a board. You have to remember that. And you have to act when the quorum is present. You have a quorum here, you can take action, you're going to be taking action on your agenda and so forth. But you, as individual board members, cannot make promises to people, whether it's hiring, whether it's I'm going to get your kid into this particular program, whatever. You have to act as a body, and you have to act when a quorum is present. All of your meetings are subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. Meeting, it's been advertised, you have an agenda, it's out in the public and so forth, so people can watch the deliberations. And any type of committee meeting that you have has to be less than a quorum. What you can't do, I've seen board members, boards sometimes doing it, we're going to have a committee meeting at 7:35 for 3 people, then we're going to have another committee meeting at 7:40, then another committee meeting at 7:50, and we're just going to have everybody kind of get on together. You really can't do that. You have to meet this committee, you have to do that in good faith. Because then you're just doing things in these private meetings where you have to do it. The committee meetings can't be done to get around the Open Public Meetings Act. Okay. Code of ethics is, as I mentioned, this is what governs you in your capacity as board members. Passed in 2001. Again, as if there's a violation, any member of the public or any other individual board member can bring an action. Lauren already said that a board, as a body, can't bring an action against another individual. An individual board member or several board members can bring an action against them. There's several different code of ethics. We're going to deal with the major ones this evening. The first one is this is the duty to uphold and enforce all rules, regulations of the state board, and any type of court orders pertaining to the schools. Now, that's not, court orders isn't just any type of court order that's out there involving any other school district. It's a court order regarding Collingswood School District. That's the court order. All rules and regulations of the state board are what you have to abide by. Good example here, and I'll leave I'll call on some people here now. What if we had the issue with wearing masks at meetings several last year? We had certain board members who were in an anti-mask side of the equation and came onto the board and said, I'm not wearing a mask, even though the executive order said everybody in schools have to wear masks during school hours or during school. What do? Is that an ethics violation? Beth Ann says no. Bill, what do you think? Board members refused, and the executive order says you got to wear a mask. And the board members, I'm not wearing a mask. It does, and what I advised the board was, yeah, I thought that board member was at risk for being in violation of this particular school ethics code because no matter what you think about that, executive orders, whatever, it was the law and the regulation that controlled school board meetings, and that particular board member was not going to be enforcing that particular rule. We eventually worked it out. We had some conversations with that board member, and we avoided that issue. But it was a good example of you, as board members, need to enforce all rules and regulations of the state board, even if you don't like them. Second one is I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children, and will seek to develop and maintain schools and so forth. In essence, you can't discriminate against protected classifications as a school board member. And you have to look out for the educational welfare of the district. Another example, a board member, speaking of the holiday, a board member at a school board meeting says some nasty things about people of the Jewish faith. The board member then votes against the program teaching the Holocaust in the schools. That particular board member, ethics charges were filed against that particular board member, and the School Ethics Commission upheld those charges because the action of speaking out against that particular religious faith, as well as voting against the core curriculum standards of teaching of the Holocaust, was considered discriminatory and not in the best educational interest of the school district. So that was the School Ethics Commission came down pretty hard on that particular board member. I believe that board member was, I think that board member was removed. I believe for that. I'm stuck, right? I will, and these two ethics sections are kind of together, meaning I will confine my board actions to policy making. We told you before about policy is your number one role here as a board member. I will confine my board action to policy making, and I will make sure that I will not administer the schools. I will make sure that they're well run. Those kind of go hand in hand. And most of the decisions and most of the advisory opinions, most of the times where people get in trouble, board members get in trouble, is because they get too involved in the running of the schools. Sometimes it's a small community. You have friends, we have neighbors, we have kids in school. There is a great, there's a lot of pressure out there to try to do something for people in your community, but that's not your role. Your role is, if you have some kind of complaint, you have some kind of issue, you have to refer that to the superintendent and let the superintendent handle that. You are not here to run the schools. Good example, and the names will remain, I won't say any names to protect the guilty. A board member called up principal and asked the principal whether or not that board member's child could be assigned a particular teacher and a guidance counselor for for the next grade. You get those calls a lot in August because everybody's looking for that class list. The board member asked the principal to do that, and the board member went further and said, hey, could you assign this kid, this kid, and this kid to my daughter's class because they're real good friends. It would make a great opportunity for that particular, for my child. We kind of had another discussion with that board member about kind of, going a little bit over the line, probably violated not only this particular provision, but probably a couple others too, by making that call to the principal. Again, carrying out the responsibility to administer schools. There was another good example of a board member going into classes, looking at things, kind of pointing out things, pointing out windows, pointing out problems in the school, kind of, thinking they're doing, it was good intent, but thinking they were kind of, helping people out. But it's really not their role. The role is to, if you have some kind of concerns, bring it to the superintendent and let him run the schools, and you make sure by evaluating him that they're run the right way. And I think it is, this is again with the limits of your power. You can't be involved in the day-to-day operations of the school. The other good example was a board member asking the secretary in the guidance department for a copy of the SAT scores for all the kids, and inspecting the lockers, going around the different locker rooms, and telling staff what you should do, what you shouldn't do during lockdowns and things of that nature. Again, that's not your role. It's the principal, it's administration, it's ultimately the superintendent. Board members engaging in exit interviews of all staff members. Again, that's you really can't be doing that. The personnel committee, there is a advisory opinion that talks about board members being involved on personnel committees. It is allowed, but you have to be very, very limited in your role there. You can tell in that advisory opinion that the School Ethics Commission did not like that. They really did not like board members being involved in this interviewing process of personnel. But if they are going to have it, if you're going to have board members involved in that, your role is very, very, as I said, very limited, because the ultimate decision is going to be made by the superintendent. And I have one more example. Is that me? All right, just one more example about the board members. Could you go back a little bit? Becoming directly involved. Who here is volunteers in some capacity in their kid's school now or at some point in time? PTA, PTO, things like that. Is that getting too involved in the running of the school by being a PTA, a room mother, or a PTA president, things of that nature? Not according to what I read in your presentation. Right, yeah. So again, you have this particular, it's really just a question of degree. Yes, you're allowed to be a board member and be a parent and be involved in your kid's education. Yes, you're allowed to volunteer to go on a trip with your kid, or to go and be a chaperone at some dance and so forth. What you can't do is run the spring musical and start directing the lighting and the students and the staff do this, and this every day for the next 3 or 4 weeks and so forth. You can't be really involved in the direct supervision of students or of staff members. Then you get involved with ethical violations. But you can be on the PTA. You can go and read to your child during the Read Across America Day and be Dr. Seuss and so forth. But you can't be that. This is a matter of degree. So I think I'm done, and I'll turn over back to Lauren.
Thank you. So I just want to disclaim that Joe's examples were not this district. On all of the examples, I think you all were a little worried about that, but yeah, not you guys. Some of our other.
That's the beauty of coming here. We have all these other districts that we've represented who do all these messed up, dumb things. that we can bring to you, and just don't do that.
That.
You're not as bad as the others, yeah.
So the next provision is, I will recognize that the authority rests with the Board of Education, and I'm not going to make personal promises or take any private action that could compromise the board. I have social media example there listed. This was in another district a couple months ago that I had. A parent was, of course, on social media complaining about a staff member in the office, one of the main offices, and one of the board members, who was a new board member, responded to her comment on social media and said, you know, I'm a board member, I'll take care of this for you, we'll have a meeting. And it was out there, and it went on a little bit, but that's a prime example of, you know, trying to take private action that is potentially going to compromise the board. Also, similar to a private meetings with stakeholders example, you should not be unilaterally having meetings with parents or teachers or any of the other stakeholders, you know, by yourself or with a small group or anything like that. The whole board of a whole. Yes.
That example, it's something a resident of the community, a parent is trying to walk that line because people want to approach you in the Acme, on the street. I just want people to understand that that's something that we can't really engage in this dialogue. We can listen.
Right,
So
listen.
What is our?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you can really become great listeners to see what the constituents are saying, what their concerns are, and, you know, but I think giving specific feedback of things that you're going to do or want to do or the board wants to do is where it gets a little hairy.
What I would do, and people in the audience didn't hear that, it was board members are often approached in the community about a certain topic at the Acme. Again, it's a small town. And what do you do in that? Because everybody knows you're a board member, but you're also a parent. And what I tell my clients is, first of all, ask the question, have you discussed this with the teacher or the principal or the BA or the superintendent? Listen to them, and all you can say is, look, I will bring that concern to the person who can help you. I cannot do that because I'm only an individual board member, but I will pass along that concern to you as soon as I can. That's how you should handle it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next provision is, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or the gain of friends. Joe kind of mentioned this a little bit. That one doesn't come up as often, I don't think. So I didn't have an example for that one. But the next one is, I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools, which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information. In another example for this with confidentiality is, a district was conducting their superintendent search, which is one of the most important things a Board of Education does, is the selection of their CEO, their main person, the superintendent. And the board of a whole was interviewing all of the candidates. And one of the board members did not disclose that she had a personal relationship with one of the candidates. They were friendly, she was friendly with his wife, things of that nature. Never disclosed anything, and they go through a few rounds of interviews, and everyone turns around after the one interview and they say, wow, it's like he had the questions ahead of time. And the next day, that board member resigned. So I can only speculate. We can all only speculate, but I'm pretty sure that is definitely one of those breaches of confidentiality, where that board member only learned the questions that would be asked in her capacity as a board member, and then went ahead and gave those questions ahead of time to the candidate.
Let me jump in and interrupt. One of the things that I've found in my career in representing boards of education is the leading cause of a dysfunctional board is mistrust among the board members in terms of what is said in executive session. Now, sometimes, again, everything has to be in the open. All of our meetings are out in the sunshine, but there's some things that have to be discussed behind closed doors in executive session. And and there's a reason, there's a good reason for that. Sometimes it's attorney-client privilege. Sometimes it's involving students. Sometimes it's involving highly sensitive personnel issues. And if there is mistrust among board members that whatever they say in that executive session is going to be out in the neighborhood or on social media or in some other capacity, it really adversely affects your ability to do what you need to do. Board members need to have that confidence that they can talk about things openly and freely, discuss things, have that deliberation. But if they feel that something that they say is going to leak out into the community, then that stymies that discussion, and it makes you, just doesn't make you a good board. Sorry, I interrupted again.
That's okay. As Joe mentioned before, you are voting to appoint the best qualified personnel only after the recommendation of the superintendent. Your role in hiring is limited, and you cannot withhold your approval for arbitrary and capricious reasons. You're supporting and protecting school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. And where a violation of this section could occur is where there's evidence of a board member taking deliberate action which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Again, this generally requires board members support the superintendent and those recommendations of the superintendent. And where criticisms of the superintendent undermine or compromise that person's ability to do their job could potentially lead to a School Ethics Act violation. You need to refer all complaints to the superintendent and act on those complaints at public meetings only after a failure of an administrative solution. This is your policy 9130, public complaints and grievances, which charges you when you are confronted with community complaints to withhold comment, commitment, or action or opinion and refer that complaint directly to the superintendent, who will then review that complaint in accordance with your policies and procedures. And the board can only act after a failure of administrative solution. I think this is the last one for me. The board and administration relationship is intended to be cooperative and harmonious, as it's not supposed to be adversarial. Sharing concerns in advance of meetings and mindfulness when it comes to matters appropriate for executive session versus public session. And it's important to remember the roles. The superintendent is the chief administrative officer of the district who's responsible for administering the district and making recommendations to the board. Whereas your business administrator oversees all your business and maintenance, prepares the annual budget, manages all fiscal planning, and serves as the district's general accountant and purchasing agent.
Thank you. Now, some specific conflicts of interest that will arise within the capacity of being a board member. You're also subject to, as Lauren mentioned, the conflict prohibited acts under the School Ethics Act, what you can't do, what you can't, certain things that you can't take in or accept. You cannot personally benefit from a contractual or business relationship. Here's an example for you. I'll put it out for the board to ask. If you're a board member and you're a bus driver for a private bus company, so you're not employed by the board, but you're employed by the private bus company. That private bus company runs routes in Collingswood, in your district. I know you guys don't have busing, but are you then conflicted as a board member because you have bus routes that take Collingswood kids in and out of Collingswood? You think you'd be conflicted out?
I would contact my counsel and
There
ask
you go.
them if there's a conflict.
Contact your counsel. That's right. Good answer. No, you would not. In that particular instance, the board member, the the board member was employed by the bus company. If the board member owned the bus company or had some type of interest in that bus company, then there'd be an issue. That board member certainly could not vote on any type of action to either hire or dismiss the bus company. But being a bus driver for that particular vendor in and of itself did not create a conflict of interest, even though they were dealing with, they could deal with Collingswood students. Personal involvement or financial involvement.
Can you clarify, because you said that it does not create a conflict of interest, but that board member would have to recuse themselves from
If the board member
actions.
was a owner of that particular bus company.
So as an employee, they would not have to recuse themselves from voting on items pertaining to that company.
That's correct, right. Because they have no financial interest. They're not going to gain any type of interest. That's how they saw it. So,
But if you asked your business administrator, I would probably tell you when in doubt to sustain.
always when, unless there's some issue where they need your vote. But when in doubt, ask your BA, ask us, and we'll give you an opinion on that. Personal involvement and financial involvement. Most of us have kids in the district. What if you have a special education student, you don't like the particular placement of that student or don't like what's going on with that particular student, and you are dissatisfied and want to assert your rights as a parent to bring some type of due process petition against the board on behalf of your child? Are you allowed to still sit on the board even though you have a complaint against the board involving your child?
No.
You say no? No. No. Oh, you say, you don't think so? Okay, you say
specifically-
yes, you don't have to be removed from the board, but if there's anything that comes up about the litigation, you would have to obviously abstain or recuse yourself.
I think, aren't you specifically precluded from taking any action against the board as a board member? So therefore, you would have to resign as a...
In that particular instance, it involved the Sea Isle School District. So I can say that, because it wasn't my client, it was actual decision. The Sea Isle parent on the board brought this action and went all the way up to our Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says there was a conflict of interest because the board member was bringing an action seeking monetary damages against the board. And they felt that those two, being a parent advocating for your child and seeking money and being on the board would create an inherent conflict, so that person could not continue to be a member of the board. They also said that if you weren't seeking monetary compensation, if you're just seeking like a changes in your students, in your child's IEP, you could still remain on the board, but obviously you would have to be recused from any discussion about that particular case. So that was a good example. Okay. Gifts, favors, you can't accept gifts, favors. You know, back in the day, Cape Ron Scatcherd had dinners with boards of education all the time. As a thank you, and to be in a more of a social setting, camaraderie and so forth, you can't do that now. You can't accept any type of dinners or tickets, Broadway shows, things of that nature from any of your vendors. The exception to that is the school board convention that we're all probably going to be going down in October, and the rule there is, or the kind of the loophole is, because the vendors open it up to all of the attendees at the convention, that's not considered to be a gift or a favor to a particular board member. So you can't turn away anybody at that particular dinner or so forth. So that's a little bit different. But individual dinners, things of that nature, can't accept them. Next one. Okay, this comes up a lot, it's particularly in negotiations of what type of conflict you have when your immediate family member, your spouse, or your child or something is employed in Collingswood. Can you be involved in negotiations of that particular contract when you have a immediate family member who's employed in Collingswood? The answer is no, you cannot. You cannot be involved in any aspect of negotiations. You can't be in attendance in executive session meetings where you discuss strategies and so forth. If it's an in-district conflict, you're going to be on the sidelines for negotiations. Out-of-district conflict, meaning that if you are a teacher or employee in another district and you're represented by a local association that's affiliated with the NJEA, there are a major statewide general union, can you then participate in negotiations? Can you be a member of the negotiating committee and so forth? And the answer is, if you are currently employed in another school district, you cannot participate in negotiations. You can't be on the negotiating team. However, once the memorandum of agreement is signed with the local association, once you have all the financial aspects of the new contract in place, the Ethics Commission allows you to vote on the contract. You can't just be there in the trenches getting that MOA, but when it's presented to you, you cannot, you can vote on that contract. One exception, we have the parentheses, absent another conflict. For example, if you were a teacher in Haddon Township and you were a member or you're a president of the Education Association in Haddon Township, and you were actively involved in negotiations for that particular local association, and you were doing it for 20 years, you may not be able to participate, and you probably won't be able to vote on the contract here in Collingswood because you have so much more involvement in the other aspects of it. Because someone's going to be looking at you and saying, are you going to be objective as a board member because of that particular affiliation with the local union in another district? Next slide. Oh, that's it. Oh, this is the immediate family member. Oh, I did that, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, we're good. Same rule if it's a relative employed in another district. And I'm not going to bore you with the difference between immediate family members and relatives. Immediate family members, your spouse, your son and daughter. Relative is pretty much anybody blood and marriage. But again, if you have a relative employed in another district, you can participate. You can participate in all aspects of negotiations if it's like a distant relative. Again, there's a chart. I think we provided a chart already for you, right, as to what type of, it gets down to brother-in-law and cousin, second cousin, once removed, things of that nature. So if you have any of those particular relatives who are employed and represented by a local association, and also if you have a family member or relative in another district that has elected not to be a member of that union, they're not a dues-paying member of that union, it still doesn't matter. If they're covered by a collective bargaining agreement in another district, even though they're not a dues-paying member, the conflict analysis still remains the same. Okay. One more? Is this me? Okay, all right.
So First Amendment and social media, board members still do retain First Amendment rights. However, those rights are not absolute because of the School Ethics Act. So you can't disclose information that's inaccurate or that you learned in confidentiality from the board, which has the potential to compromise the board. You can't represent personal opinion on social media as that of the board, and you should not publicly criticize staff on social media. I think Joe would agree with me. If it was up to us, we would tell no one to have social media, especially board members, but I understand that is a way to connect and with the constituents and get out there. So if you are going to use social media actively, you want to have a disclaimer in certain situations. Then that disclaimer should say something to the effect of this, that you're speaking in your capacity as a private citizen and not as a board member, and your views and opinions don't represent that of the whole board. However, even with disclaimers, content and substance matters, And this is the last slide. There is a school ethics opinion where the SEC basically found that content really does matter, even if you use the disclaimer, but you're speaking as a board member, you're saying things that only a board member would know, and you're putting it out there on social media. The disclaimer is really not doing anything. So again, everyone needs to just be really careful with social media activity because it could be violative of the act.
And one of the classic examples was the board member in Camden City Board of Education several years ago, I think went out on social media, went out and called the superintendent a terrorist, among other insults and so forth. I don't know, even if that particular board member used a disclaimer, calling the superintendent a terrorist and some other nasty names, that compromised the board. It violates social media, no disclaimer. It was a lot of things there, and I think that board member was also removed as well. So again, nobody ever does that anything here in Collingswood like that. You're all perfect board members, but again, you do learn from what other people may do. And I'll second what Lauren said. Social media is job security for lawyers who represent boards of education, because people say a lot of things on social media. You just have to recognize you can never get it back. It's always going to be out there. And anytime you put out on social media something, as you're a board member, people are going to see you as saying it as a board member. Use the disclaimers, but be very, very cautious about what that is, what you say out there. Again, it's not what the First Amendment is all about. We recognize that. First Amendment is there to protect speech. It's there to protect sometimes offensive speech. But please, as board members, be mindful of what you say on social media, and make sure you're mindful that it doesn't violate the School Ethics Act as well. So, any questions for any of us? Do you want me to take questions from the audience, or? The board members first, yeah. Okay. All right. And if there are any questions for Lauren, I believe your policy says go through the board president. You board members cannot contact us individually. And if you contact us and say, hey, do you know what so-and-so did as a board member? I'm not going to take that call. I'm going to say, well, first of all, you have to check with the board president. We don't get involved in going after other board members for board violations. But again, if you have a question, you have a concern, talk to the board president. We'll be glad to help you out.
Thank you very much for this. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do you need us to sign
Yeah, there's
the ethics?
there's certifications, and that's got to be
Okay.
filed with
All right. So we'll get that to Beth Ann. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to the second presentation given by Dr. Principato about the Gifted and Talented program.
Did you want this, Jack? Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Good evening. I'd like to present Collingswood Public Schools Gifted and Talented programs. So our Gifted and Talented programs, we have several programs. In our elementary school, identified kindergarten through first grade students receive a combination of whole class and small group instruction using the primary elementary thinking skills program and STEAM activities. Our second through fifth grade students are identified for participation in one or more of the small group programs for the following units of instruction: reading and literacy, mathematics, and science. Our secondary students in grades 6 through 12 are served through a comprehensive accelerated honors and advanced placement programs in the humanities, STEM, the arts, and leadership. And 6th grade gifted and talented students are now eligible for enrollment in the 6th grade accelerated mathematics course. So what's new this year? So our program delivery, we welcome Lisa DeAngelis, who is here. Welcome, Lisa. She is our elementary gifted and talented teacher. She will work with gifted and talented students in 1st through 5th grades. The learning acceleration specialists in each of the elementary schools will continue to provide G&T services to kindergarten students. Our entrance criteria, we have modified our gifted and talented entrance criteria for 5th grade students so they correlate with the entrance criteria for the other grades. And finally, our middle school expansion. 6th grade gifted and talented students are now eligible for enrollment into the 6th grade accelerated mathematics course. What is our elementary gifted and talented program? Well, it's instruction that goes beyond the existing curriculum. In grades K through 1st grade, it is 30 minutes per week, and in 2nd through 5th grade, it is 60 minutes per week. The entrance criteria for kindergarten students will receive whole class instruction for the first 20 minutes of the session. Kindergarten students may be selected to receive the last 10 minutes of small group instruction using the PETS framework and STEAM activities. Multiple measures are used to identify students. First, they need an instructional level D by the 2nd interval, which is March of 2024, from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading. They need an Into Math growth measure score of 81 or higher on the mid-year Into Math growth measure assessment. Kindergarten instruction will commence at the beginning of the 3rd marking period. The entrance criteria for 1st grade students will receive whole class instruction for the first 20 minutes of the session. 1st grade students may be selected to receive the last 10 minutes of small group instruction using the PETS framework and STEAM activities. Again, multiple measures are used to identify students. The requirements: students need to be at an instructional level G by the 1st interval, which is November, December, from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading. They also need an Into Math growth measure score of 181 or higher by the 1st interval, November through December. 1st grade instruction will commence at the beginning of the 2nd trimester. Our 2nd grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the small group instruction for the following units. For the 1st marking period, it is mathematics. So the beginning of year Into Math growth measure score of 281 or higher is needed. And they must earn an E in mathematics on their final 1st grade report card. For the 2nd marking period, that is reading and literacy, the requirement is instructional level L by the 1st interval from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. The 3rd marking period is science, and the requirements are teacher recommendation and earning an E in science on their 1st and 2nd trimester report card. The entrance criteria for 3rd grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the gifted and talented programs for the following units of study. If they receive a score of 95% on the LSAT 8, which is a universal screener, which I'll talk about a few slides down, Or for the first marking period for mathematics, the beginning of year into math growth measure score of 381 or higher, and earn an E in mathematics on their final second grade report card. For the second marking period is reading and literacy, and they need an instructional level O for the first interval from the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading, and earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. The third marking period is science, and they need teacher recommendation and to earn an E in science on their first and second trimester report card. The entrance criteria for fourth grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the gifted and talented programs for the following units. For the first marking period, mathematics, they need a beginning of year into math growth measure score of 481 or higher, and they need to earn an E in mathematics during each previous year's trimester. For the second marking period, which is reading and literacy, they need an instructional level R from the first interval, which is November through December, of the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading. They also have to earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. And for science, which is the third marking trimester, you need teacher recommendation and earn an A in science during the first and second trimester report cards. The entrance requirements for fifth grade. Fifth grade students may be selected for participation in one or more of the gifted and talented programs for the following units. The first marking period, which is mathematics, they need an into math growth measure score of 581 or higher, and they have to earn an A in mathematics during each previous year's trimester. For the second marking period, which is reading and literacy, they need an instructional level U from the first interval, November through December, of the Fontes and Pinnell instructional level expectations for reading, and they need to earn an E in reading, writing, and word study on their most recent report card. The third marking period, which is science, they need teacher recommendation and to earn an A in science during the first and second trimester report cards. The entrance criteria for sixth grade. Sixth grade students will be eligible for enrollment in the sixth grade accelerated mathematics course if they attain 3 of the 4 categories below. That they were enrolled in the fifth grade gifted and talented program. They exceeded expectations on the fourth grade NJSLA mathematics. They need less support on the fifth grade Start Strong, and they exceeded expectations in the Into Math end of year assessment. If a student does not meet 3 of the 4 listed categories and a family wishes to have their child considered for the course, an appeal process will be followed. The primary source of the appeal will be the results of the 5th grade New Jersey Student Learning Assessment Mathematics. The score for this assessment, we have it now, but we usually get it during the summer months. So the OLSAT 8, what is it and why do we use it? So the Otis Lennon School Abilities Test, otherwise known as the OLSAT 8, is a universal screener tool to help identify additional students into our gifted and talented program. It also provides information about all of our students' relative strengths and weaknesses. It provides all students the opportunity to participate. It minimizes the disproportionality in our gifted and talented identification. And it provides a second pathway to gifted and talented identification. It is a multiple choice aptitude test given by the gifted and talented teacher in the classroom as a group. It is nationally standardized and norm referenced. The OLSAT 8 is designed to assess verbal comprehension, verbal reasoning, pictorial reasoning, figural reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. So who is being assessed? All third grade students will be administered the LSAT 8. All students who were previously identified as gifted and talented through the LSAT 8 will continue to participate in our programs. The exempt students, students of families who requested non-participation, students who have previously taken the LSAT 8 in second grade if they came from another district, and students who have been pre-exposed. So we are using the online version of Level D. It's about 45 minutes in length, the third grade version. It's proctor navigated. It consists of verbal and nonverbal sections. The verbal sections speaks to relationships between words, building sentences, understanding different definitions based on context. The nonverbal sections, reasoning using images and illustrations, finding similarities and differences, and understanding and continuing progressions. So here are a few examples of the LSAT 8 questions. So Amanda finally found a blank to the problem that would make everyone happy. Is the answer A, cause, B, drawback, C, reward, D, solution, or E, source? So the correct answer is solution. By reading through the sentence, it is clear that Amanda was able to find something that would help solve the problem for everyone. The word solution means a way of solving a problem, making it the correct answer. So here's another pictorial. So in the first line, you have apple is to tree, and the second line is egg is to. Is the answer cow, chicken, pan, or lemon? The correct answer is chicken. In the top row, the first picture is an apple. The second picture is a tree, which is where the apple comes from, since apples grow on trees. The bottom row should follow the same pattern. In the first box, there's a picture of an egg. The next picture will be a picture of where the eggs come from, making the chicken the correct answer. Okay. So the scoring of the LSAT. So there's 3 types of scoring. The first is the raw score, which is just simply the number of questions answered correctly. The second score is the School Ability Index, the SAI score. And this raw score is compared against the scores of other children in the same age group in the national sample and converted into this SAI score. The average SAI score is 100, and the maximum score is 150. The percentile score, the SAI score, is then converted to a percentile score, which simply tells you how a student performed relative to other students in the national sample in their age group. For example, a percentile score of 95% would indicate that the student performed better than 95% of students in their age who took the LSAT. So what's next? So letters to third grade parents notifying them of the LSAT assessment dates will go out tomorrow and Wednesday. And parents will also be able to opt out. There will be a section in that letter that I send home that you're able to opt out if you choose for your child not to participate in the LSAT 8. The third grade students are taking the practice test this week, and it's a very, very short version, just so students understand what it looks like and what it feels like. And then the third grade students will take the actual LSAT 8 assessment one day within the next 3 weeks, so it's a 3-week window. Letters will be then sent home to families of kindergarten through 5th grade students who qualify for our gifted and talented programs. And periodically, we'll be meeting with the gifted and talented teacher to kind of gauge how we're doing and where we need to go. And that's it, right? Thank you, Dr. Jack. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Principato. Just 2 quick ones. Was last year the first year of the LSAT 8?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any idea the number, like what that led in terms of access for students to the program that took the LSAT versus the criteria that we traditionally use?
Okay, so the LSAT was an additional layer, right? So everyone who was able to get in the regular way The OLSAT, I believe in almost every school, there was at least one additional person who made it into gifted and talented, which was so exciting for us to see that, there were additional students that we were able to catch.
To add on to that, on the slide about the OLSAT and why it's used, you mentioned it minimizes the disproportionality in our gifted and talented identification. By that point, disproportionality, like what do you mean by disproportionality
So
there?
disproportionality in terms of our English language proficiency students in relation to our students in the lower socioeconomic status, those who are typically underrepresented in our gifted and talented population.
So for the point about our English language learners, so is the OLSAT 8 results in a singular score, right? Not a subject-based score?
No, it's not subject-based,
Okay.
right.
So then the idea would be then that if you're, say, an English learner, if you did well enough in everything but the verbal portion, that would get you into the gifted and talented
Well, it would
program?
depend on your score in relation to other students, right? So I don't know that it would, definitely get you into the program if that's what you're asking. But the OLSAT is all about logic and reasoning. And so, English language learners are supposed to have a more level playing field.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just building on that point, is the OLSAT 8 given in languages other than English?
So it does have the capability, yes.
And is that something that the district would be aware of for certain students?
Well, I would imagine that we would have to be. However, if I have a third grade student, I don't really know how much of their native language they understand how to read and write, especially if they've been in an English language program for a while. So we would really have to look closely, at individual kids to see which is best for them.
Yeah, and I know they get additional testing accommodations. Would those accommodations carry over to the OLSAT?
So not all the accommodations carry over. Some of them do, but not all of them carry over.
What happens if a student moves into our district after third grade for elementary school and would like to participate in this program? Do they need to be given the LSAT or OLSAT, sorry, or would we, definitely not the LSAT, or would we just use the other criteria instead?
We
for
would
those
just use
students?
the other criteria. However, the OLSAT 8 is a standard assessment that many districts throughout the nation use. So when a student
So they may
comes
be
to us quite often, especially a lot of our districts give it at the end of second grade.
Okay.
And so sometimes they will come to us with the OLSAT 8 results.
And is this, so this is only available to students to take in third grade? Is there,
Yeah.
if for whatever reason they're not available the day they're supposed to take it, I guess because it's 3 weeks, do they have the option to, like, they're absent the day it's supposed to be given?
So they're makeups.
There's makeup days
Yeah,
and
they're
things like that.
makeups day. Yeah, we would have to create new sessions, but they're very easy to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to how the guidelines were developed?
So the guidelines for each grade level? Well, so in each grade level, each of the areas, for example, the math, they had to exceed expectations. And so for the literacy, they had to exceed the expectations, because in our gifted and talented program, what we're saying is that we recognize that these students need something outside of their regular curriculum.
I guess I mean more of how you developed it. How did you come up with the different criteria for the grade levels? Just more broadly than that.
Oh, well, so we use our local assessments, our district assessments, and in the case of our sixth grade, we also used our state assessments as well.
One other question, I missed this when I was asking the first time. One of the reasons that a kid maybe wouldn't be eligible for the OLSAT was they're pre-exposed. What does that mean?
So if they had the test and for whatever reason they stopped the test or they didn't receive a score, because what OLSAT will do is if a student just lingers for a while, they'll exit out. And so sometimes they will not receive a score and they're considered as pre-exposed.
is there, I'm assuming there's an appeals process, say for parents who feel that their kid should be in the Gifted and Talented program. Can you, I guess, detail what that is?
Sure. And so there is an appeals process because we want to include everyone. So we feel as if a parent has data that we do not have or has additional information that could better help us see the bigger picture of the child, then we recommend that the parent write a letter to the building principal, and the building principal could possibly put together the MTSS team, bring the parent in, and review all of the current data that we have, along with any additional data that parents can bring to the table.
Any other questions from board members? Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Pizzarello.
Thank you.
Next, we have the HIB self-assessment report being given by Mr. Gersick.
Thank you, everyone. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Bentley, Capehart, and Scatcherd. I think we've been using them since I was hired over 20 years ago, along with a partner, Rob Musilli, who's been wonderful in helping the administration with our ever-changing world and our legal issues. They've just been wonderful. So it's great following them. Tonight I'm presenting on our HIB self-assessment report. HIB stands for Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying. So each of our school administrators rated themselves on 26 different items on how well they thought they did in preparing, training, and ultimately evaluating harassment, intimidation, and bullying complaints and allegations this past 2022-2023 school year. The buildings that were involved were the middle school and high school, our 5 elementary schools, along with our Collingswood preschool that's over at the First United Methodist Church, and also we have a separate evaluation done by our 3 preschools that are housed, Collingswood preschools that are housed in our Oak Lynn facility. All of our schools did very well with their self-assessment, scoring anywhere from 70 to 78 points, which was the maximum. We did identify 4 areas that we wanted to work on this year. Our first one was with all the district administrators. We met with Melissa DiAugustano and the tech team, and she worked with us through our live webinar with Genesis, who's our student, what's the word they use for it? Student data system, where we log all of our information, both with anything regarding harassment, intimidation, bullying, both the confirmed cases and the alleged cases all have to be reported to the state. So it's important that we got it right. So this year we had a live webinar as all of our district administrators that deal with students in discipline all participated. We also are, this year we're bringing on 2 additional HIB anti-bullying specialists to help with the evaluations. We have 10 days from the initial report of a possible potential harassment, intimidation, bullying till the time it has to be completed. And a lot of times when you're working with students, stories change, there's some gray area. You have to go back and re-question students. There's students that are absent. So we want to make sure that we're getting those done within the 10 days. And normally our anti-bullying specialists all have their other jobs that they're responsible for. So we're bringing on 2 additional people that are volunteering for training this year. Also, it's really building based on how everyone completes these investigations. But our middle school has done a wonderful job over the past couple years making sure all their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. So I've met with Mr. Jefferson and their school climate officer and put everything in writing, and we're disseminating that to all of our other schools. So we're all following a very similar plan so that we're all getting the same types of results. The last thing, specifically at the high school, we're meeting weekly. We have a school climate meeting with the administration at the high school and our school climate officers and myself, where we're making sure that the building's running smoothly, issues regarding security are covered, harassment, intimidation, and bullying is brought up every meeting, and we're just looking at that point to make sure that everything is running smoothly. All this information will be posted to the state starting tomorrow, and then it will also appear on our district website for each individual school. And then next month, I'm back again to talk about our SSDS report, which basically breaks down the discipline and total numbers of HIBs for the district throughout last school year. Any questions?
I think I might have missed 4. I heard that you were
So
going,
the weekly meetings.
the weekly, right?
Talking with, getting on page where everyone is doing the same type of process.
That's the one I missed.
Okay, yep. The middle school has done a wonderful job laying everything out step by step, and we're trying to get all of our schools to follow that scenario so that everyone's reporting properly and efficiently.
I think creating that guide so that all of the schools can universally kind of follow a best practice is a great, will be a great addition for other schools, I would imagine. Make sure that it's all kind of more of a systematized process for everyone. So
Absolutely.
that's a
Dr.
great idea.
McDowell has been very good about letting schools run themselves. But there is a way of saying, hey, here's a best practice, it works. And all the administrators have been very, very receptive to, oh, I didn't think of that, or, okay, let's try that. And so we've met with a lot of positive feedback so far.
That's great. Any other board members have any questions for Mr. Gersick?
Does each building have somebody who is responsible for HIB investigations and/or complaints?
For the middle school and high school, we each have an individual person based on the size of both schools. And at the elementary, there's about 2 people for the 5 schools. And we're looking to increase the elementary by 1 and secondary by 1 also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to our final presentation of the evening. Dr. McDowell is going to talk to us about how the beginning of school went in the district.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. School opening is always this mystery to individuals who don't work in schools. And so we thought that it would be interesting in order to show you what actually happens during the first few days of school across all of our schools so that you see what we see. And so this is more of a celebration of the collective work and planning of the faculty and staff all throughout the summer. And it really highlights the level of energy and excitement from our students and our families when they started back with school. But to get us started and to keep us grounded, we start with our mission. really focusing on, because we're such a diverse school community, it's really important that we provide an inclusive and supportive environment that encourages and empowers all students. And so that's what we're going to keep drilling down and focusing on. Next slide. And so we started with our welcome, and so on September 1st, we welcomed all of our faculty and staff in Collingswood and Oak Lynn. It was almost 500 individuals, administrators, teachers, interns, support staff, and we started with just celebrations and then highlighting our areas of focus. And so we are continuing with our learning acceleration focus in year 3, ensuring that we meet the needs of every learner through the lens of equity. And so equity is ensuring that every student has what they need and removing barriers that prevent students from getting what they need. And so we will continue with our targeted model of instruction at the elementary, where we shared last month our learning acceleration plan at elementary, which includes classroom teachers, learning acceleration specialists, as well as MTSS coaches in the classroom providing targeted levels of instruction based on where students are. So there are different tiers of instructions based on what students need, and we want to make sure that we continue with that work. Leadership coaching for equity. This is the month-to-month, the week-to-week work that happens with the administrative staff and the site-based leadership teams. Making sure that we're using equity as the lens in which we operate and that we're looking at data in order to inform decisions. And then making sure that our professional learning plan is consistent with what we expect to see, support, and excel at in our schools. Reinforcing our student support model, and so we will continue with our social emotional learning. We are now in year 3 of social emotional learning in our elementary schools. We're in year 2 in our middle school, and we'll be fully implementing year 1 at our high school in our social emotional learning curriculum. And then also continuing with professional learning communities, which is really how you build collective efficacy in schools. Giving our professionals opportunities to come together, to work together, to look at student data, make informed decisions, talk about best practice, and support one another in support of the students. Next slide. And so one of the things that we learned last year in our haste or our pursuit to come back from hybrid learning, to come back from remote instruction, to come back from the isolation or the disruptive nature of the pandemic, was we focused extremely heavily on academics. What does a learning environment look like? What does a curriculum look like? What are all of the T's that need to be crossed and the I's in terms of the systems and structures related to school? What we did not place the same level of emphasis on was, what did we lose in terms of culture? What did we lose in terms of isolation? What did we lose in terms of some of our students staring at a box for 2 years? What were some of the social things? What were some of the community building things that we needed to invest in? And so we're not making that mistake this year. We're placing great emphasis on supporting positive culture across our schools. That starts with building staff capacity and supporting them when they say that they need things. Implementation of a culturally and linguistically responsive curriculum. We have an extremely diverse school district. And so our curriculum has to mirror the students that we serve and the families that we also provide support to. Professional learning has to also mirror that same level of value. We're also looking to build pipelines of leaders with the establishment of a second educational leadership cohort. Last school year, we had 12 of our classroom teachers participate in a year's worth of professional learning so that we can start building capacity to grow our own leaders from within Collingswood Public Schools. One of the individuals within that cohort is now on the administrative team, and 2 other additional members are leading in their schools and coordinating support and programs for other staff. We want to reinforce our school support model with school culture, expansion of restorative justice and positive behavior supports. It needs to be fun to come to school, but we also need to acknowledge that school is a place to learn, and we expect young people and not so young people to make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, it's our collective job to teach them a better way without demonizing, without being punitive. And so we're going to focus our efforts on restorative justice. High expectations for classroom instruction. The most important place for any of us to be is in the classroom when instruction is taking place. And so we're going to be increasing levels of movement in and out of classrooms to focus on, are we seeing the things that we expect to see? What supports do our educators need? What additional resources are warranted? And how is the game moving as the game is being played? With walkthroughs and constructive feedback aligned with school acceleration plans. Next slide. So last year we started, if you have the opportunity to stand in front of 500 people, which our administrators did, what would a message, a positive message, be to faculty and staff as they begin planning for their school year? And so we carry that into this year as well. And so what you're going to see is direct quotes from members of the district leadership team, which includes principals, assistant principals, secretaries, support staff, in their opening messages. And so the opening day message to faculty and staff was much larger, and so there were more quotes. And so, but we wanted to show you what was happening in some of our schools. What you see in this image is a kindergarten class. This is one of our kindergarten classes, year 2 of one of our educators, 21 years of experience, phenomenal when you walk into that space, the way that she is able to command and wrangle 4 and 5-year-olds with precision. It's a sight to behold. Next slide, please. This is one of our other classes. And so the quotes are sometimes directly consistent with what you're seeing, but the level of energy that we saw across all of our schools was nothing short of phenomenal. You walked into a school, after the schools have been quiet for the last 6 to 8 weeks, you walk into a school and the most powerful thing that you can hear is laughter from our students. The energy is infectious, and there was permagrin on everybody's face over the last week and a half. Next slide. Be the person that you need and find joy in every day. This is one of our preschool classes. And as you can see, there is high levels of energy with 3 and 4-year-olds, and it takes special people to work in our preschool. And so one of our goals is to continue to make sure that we are filling all of our preschool seats. We still have a few left, and so tell your friends, tell your neighbors, if they have a 3 or a 4-year-old that is interested in high-quality preschool, we still have a few seats that are available. Next slide. This is one of our elementary schools, one of our leaders in our educational leadership cohort. When we think about leader, the term leader is a description, not a job title. And so we have classroom leaders in every building. We have school leaders in every building. We have district leaders. We have department leaders. And so one of the things that we're continuing to focus on is doing what's best for kids. And so when we say that good things happen when you teach from the heart, that's the lens in which we operate. Next slide. Being flexible and asking for help. This is another one of our classes, and the sign in the back was clearly indicative of what that classroom leader expects of all of their students. And so students were doing independent reading, but what they had just finished was an in-depth discussion on a book. And so as we build capacity for our students to be lovers of learning, it's also important that we give them opportunities to process their learning with adults in a safe space. Next slide. We're the weather makers in our classroom. This is consistent with the science class that we saw. And so for any of those of us that have been in this particular science class, it's like going to a museum. There's always something new. There's always something to spark better questions. Students are heavily engaged, and there's a lot of activity that happens in this particular middle school science class every single day. This is another one of our secondary classes where we're talking about smiles are powerful and they're free. And so this is one of the members of our child study team. And so what we have seen is in our school district, we have students from all different walks of life, all different categories of academic ability, all different types of needs. But the one thing that is clear and consistent is that a smile costs you very little, but it pays huge dividends. And so that was an English class that we were seeing where they were going over expectations and aspirations for the year. This is a social studies class where they were talking about the extremely complex subject of 9/11. And so we were very fortunate to see the setup of the class. We were fortunate to see the types of essential questions, and as we left the classroom, we know that they were engaged in much deeper levels of discussion in a very respectful manner that honored the magnitude of that moment. Accountability, discipline, and structure, when implemented compassionately, are the highest form of love. This is one of our high school classrooms and one of our high school administrators that has made this statement, and that couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot of energy this year moving into our high school. They have reset, and they're looking at focusing on the positivity and really being able to tell the story about who they are so others don't tell it for them. And the last is a 45-second hype video that is how we started the year in our secondary school. And if you could click that, please. Hit pause. No, I'm just going to turn the volume up.
Hey everybody, it's Mr. Newman, new principal of Collingswood High School. Let's go.
That concludes the opening week. Images from opening week will also be posted on the school district website later this week. Thank you.
I just wanted to say two things. One, no shade to the other administrators, but I happened to be there for opening day, and I gotta give it to Dr. McMullen serenading the entire staff. He stole the show for sure. But I really wish he'd do that for all of us more often, because that was just fun to witness. But also a big shout out to Mr. Newman, who I've only heard wonderful things about, and I know lots of other people have as well, because they've enjoyed sharing it with me, which I appreciate. But the high school seems like it's a really great place to be right now, and the kids are absolutely feeling that, and I know he's putting in a lot of really hard work to get them there, and I think he's to be commended for that. So I just wanted to make sure to add that to his hype video for opening day. And now I'm just going to move back to the other seat so we can get started. Okay, so moving right along, we are going to have a brief committee of the whole session. Can I have a motion to enter committee of the whole, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Dr. McDowell already read the mission and vision, so that saves us a little bit of time in this instance. I always just want to ground us in what we're here to do, which is to provide an inclusive and supportive environment that inspires and empowers every student, with the vision of fostering the qualities necessary for students to serve as contributors to an equitable and socially just community. What we wanted to take a moment to talk about this evening during Committee of the Whole was something that came up actually at the last board meeting. A community member made a public comment with some concerns and questions about the district calendar, particularly the addition of extra PLC half-days or early dismissal days for elementary school, which is a new addition to this year. So we wanted to take some time to address the reasoning behind it, while also acknowledging that this is not an easy ask for particularly parents of preschool and elementary aged students where childcare is the biggest concern. And if we all had a magic wand, we would have universal childcare along with high quality public education. Unfortunately, we're not there right now, so we've got decisions to make. So I'm going to first turn it over to, I was going to say Ms. Coleman, but if you're busy, I can start with, sorry. I just know that you were going to just mention there, when we talk about the district calendar and we have certain days that are early dismissal days for PD, and then there are certain days that are early dismissal days for elementary conferences, things like that. The first, do I have the thing with me? I thought I did, but I think I didn't bring it. Oh, yes, I do. So the calendar that's got like the pictures on it, the majority of those days are contractual half-days or days off. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Correct, like the contract calls for, I think it's 183 student days, I'm looking at Rob, 187 total maximum days. So that would include 3 PD days, and then the first day, the opening day. I'm looking at Rob, and hopefully I'm getting that right
Yeah,
off the top of my head, but it's like a total of 187 days, but 183 would be for kids. So then you have 3 PD days are included in the contract, and then 1 day for like the opening of school.
And then some of the early dismissal days, for instance, the ones for elementary,
Yeah.
twice a year for
That's contractual.
conferences,
That is-
that's a
yes.
contractual issue as well. And some of the early dismissal days before major school breaks and things like that. Am I correct in understanding that while those might not be exactly contractual, they're kind of like past practice agreed upon that everybody is on the same page that those are days that,
Correct.
okay, that are to be expected to be early dismissal days. So that was just going over, that is going over the first page of the school calendar and where some of those things come from. Before we get into the PLCs, which is a change, could, Dr. McDowell, could you talk a little bit about the days that you see on the beginning calendar that are called PLD, which I believe would be Professional Learning Day? What happens during those days, whether they're early dismissal days or full days off?
Reagan, really quickly, just to clarify, so the contractual days that you're talking about in terms of half days, that's 20, correct? Like, number of half days, would that be?
Did you just count them? I
Yeah.
don't have them counted.
Okay.
So if it's 20, yes.
Okay.
If you're talking about from this page.
Yeah, from that calendar.
Then yes.
Okay.
Those aren't all, like the early dismissal for Rosh Hashanah would not be a contractual. That was a cultural choice to honor another religion. Same with, a holiday, thank you, religious holiday. Same with the day that we're closed for Yom Kippur. Like those things are choices we're making to be inclusive of all of our students. But the early dismissal days that you're seeing on there, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So anyway, sorry, could you just tell us what happens during professional learning days that are not PLC days?
So PLD is a professional learning day, professional development, training, and so dependent on what the role or the responsibility of the staff member. For example, math teachers, we're going through curriculum implementation. So into math for middle and high school, so that will be the bulk of their professional learning if they're a math teacher. If they are a classroom aide, depending on what their assignment, some of them will go through restraint and de-escalation training. Other staff members will go through equity work, equity mindset, and then other department-specific content as driven by our overarching professional learning plan. And so the PLC time is time for our educational professionals to come together to look at student data, to talk about best practices, sharing of resources, and then instructional planning, separate and apart from contact time with students, which is the bulk of their day, contact time in front of students.
So for the professional learning days, those are often larger group settings, content specific, those sorts of things. The PLC, because unless you're in education, this is not a distinction that most folks probably understand anyway. Could you talk a little bit, or actually any of the teachers that are here could probably weigh in as well, that what happens in a PLC meeting? First of all, my understanding of it is that it's a much smaller group of teachers working together.
Yes. So it's probably important, just so that we all have common language, just for me to kind of share PLC. It's a team of educators who share ideas to enhance teaching practice and create a learning environment where all students can achieve. Most PLCs operate within their specific school buildings. Some operate across the district dependent on the content area in which they support. They can be organized by grade level, content area, or full teaching staff. They're done best when they're in a much smaller group where our teachers can have really targeted levels of conversations and get really granular about the students in which they serve. And so PLCs are often used to enhance teaching and learning because they allow teachers to share best practice and plan for ways to drive student achievement. They also allow our teachers to build relationships amongst themselves. They also help our teachers stay on top of new research and tools that they may not have time to do when they're in front of kids. In addition, it helps them reflect on their practice and make adjustments as necessary based on what the data is telling them. And so as a district, for many, many years, we traditionally implemented district-wide early dismissal days, and PLCs were kind of roped in. And so there was a blending of, it could be a PLC time, it could be a professional training time. And so there's a lot of value in bringing teachers together to be able to look at data and share best practices. But unfortunately, this practice was halted during the pandemic. And so for many, many years leading up to school closures, we had early dismissal days every month, dating back to 2015. We stopped that practice during the pandemic because we were in a very different place. We reintroduced that practice in middle and high school in 21-22, coming back from school closure and hybrid learning, because we knew that based on the disruption to student learning, that faculty and staff, specifically at the high school level, were going to need additional collaborative time and support in order to address what they were seeing in classrooms. And so we reinstituted or reintroduced that in the 21-22 school year. And we made some revisions in 22-23 based on the feedback from faculty and staff from 21 and 22. And so we conducted a survey of our middle school and our high school staff in order to determine were the supports beneficial or not. And the survey data indicated that 80% of staff surveyed found that PLC meetings were effective use of time, with 93% saying that the time was adequate to meet the student needs. Really drilling down and saying that at least once a month was probably the appropriate usage of time for them to be able to come together to talk about students. And so some of the direct feedback that we got from faculty and staff was that being given time to focus on analyzing data and incorporate it in their teaching was of value. Giving teachers time to speak with their colleagues about what was working and what was not working was also of value. And so having flexibility to discuss topics as driven by teachers, opposed to being heavily drilled down with mandates and external expectations, was also one of our biggest takeaways. And then being able to have time to compare lessons and activities and discuss how do we make things better internally were some of the things that they wanted to really focus on. And so one of the faculty members said that when the time is properly used, it can be helpful to be able to use for collaboration, bringing in outside resources, or just general wellness and check-ins among faculty and staff in a very challenging environment. And so with the stress on mental health, it was beneficial to have time set aside to be able to look at not just the social, emotional, academic needs of students, but also the social, emotional, and mental health needs of the faculty and the staff and the caregivers for said students. And so it's also really important to note that we used all of this feedback in order to be able to create an environment to provide access to collaborative time at the elementary. We tried this last year to figure out a way to do it during the school day. The schedule just, it didn't work within the schedule for elementary. And so there was also questions around if we had a model that was being provided at the secondary level, it seemed to be inconsistent and not complementary for that level of expectation to be imposed in our elementary schools, who had more face-to-face student contact time than at the secondary level. And so we ran up against having a schedule that didn't necessarily work for the goals that we were trying to accomplish. And so we had to pause. And so we looked at what are the ways in which we could give the teachers the time that they were asking for, but also how are we constantly asking how can we do better. And so in full disclosure, we fully acknowledge that the burden that this particular practice places on families, particularly those with younger children, we understand that access to high-quality childcare is an issue. It's an issue in this region, it's an issue across the state and across our country. However, we also believe it is extremely important to provide our educational professionals the time that they need to support the growing social, emotional, and academic needs of our students, which is growing in its complexity every single day. And so without providing opportunities for our educators to be able to come together and talk about the things that really matter that they're seeing in the classrooms, we're going to come up short. And so we've been able to make extremely meaningful progress in our elementary schools up to a point, but what we're seeing is that that is not sufficient based on the needs that our students are presenting day in and day out in the classroom. And so our teachers need time to be able to work through how to effectively support the growing needs of our students. And so one of the commitments that, as we've talked about this and we've really wrestled with this over the last several years, is how do we in the future create a schedule and an opportunity to be able to fill both needs that demonstrates our commitment to support our educators, but also serve to lessen the impact on affected families. And so we will be looking at ways in which to do that in the future. And so that's kind of where we are as we look into September.
Can you kind of clarify for us when you're, everybody listening, when you say we, who are you talking about? I'm assuming this isn't a unilateral decision that's being made.
No, and so the academic team who leads the development of the academic calendar, and so department supervisors, principals, our association leaders, they have a seat at the table, and they are working collaboratively in order to make recommendations and organize the calendar, and to help us figure out the direction that we need to go based on what our educators are asking for and what their needs are. And so this is not a decision that is unilaterally made from the district office. This is a decision that has to be made collaboratively between what schools are asking for, what we're able to provide within the confines of our professional agreements with our employees.
Can I just make sure I have the understanding clear and maybe clarify some of these terms that are being used here? Because I know it's a pretty hefty topic that took me a while to get my head around, so I just want to make sure everyone in the audience understands. So a moment ago you were talking about PLD versus PLC. So PLD, Professional Learning Days, those are the ones that are on that front page calendar with the month-to-month display. And so it says PLD, those are those days, and those are the days that are basically a district mandates, like, hey, everyone's getting this professional development, or these are the trainings that you have to take, by, say, state regulation or whatever kind of focus we have as district. Then there's PLC, which is Professional Learning Communities, those are the additional half days on the second page of the calendar, correct? And so that's the two differences that we're talking about. And the PLCs really are, from what you're saying, are those smaller group, maybe grade level or content level teams that meet maybe once a month or twice a month to go over topics pertinent to their area, and also review student data and how they can address student needs in those times, correct? So for the elementary school level, just going back to the comment that the member of the public made last board meeting, there are 30 half days at the elementary level, and so from what I'm understanding here, we have one day which was purely by choice, which was this past Friday, right? And that was cultural recognition. But then there are about 20 half days that are required of us by contractually, and then there are these 9 half days PLCs that were added back into the calendar this year for the elementary school level to support these learning communities for the elementary school teachers. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? So I remember a community member getting up last month and talking about this and saying, you know, they looked at various other districts and see how we compare to them, and we are drastically different from them. So why, just so everybody here can get an answer, why are we so drastically different from the surrounding towns around us? Surrounding towns in terms of like our time, our half-days and whatnot?
So I am not necessarily in the comparison game, and so we are very attuned to our needs. We're not attuned to the needs or the nuance or the differences in other school districts. And so what I will say is that we have an extremely diverse school district with a wide range of need. And so our due diligence is how do we accomplish or achieve the goals that we have here in Collingswood to be able to meet that need. And so when we look at total time, and so we're looking at across the course of the entire school year, and I'm not diminishing the impact that this has. I'm also a parent that has child care challenges. My daughter is at one of our schools. And so 18 hours of collaborative time for our educators throughout the course of 183 days. And so that's really what we're trying to give to them in order to begin to address some of the things that we're seeing in our schools, and to give the time that our educators are asking for to be able to meet the needs based on what we're seeing in our schools. There are other school districts, they're not as diverse as we are. There are other school districts, they have different schedules, they have different professional obligations to their employees. We're not experts in the nuance of their districts, but we are intimately familiar with what we need here.
So something I forgot to ask in the beginning before I know other people want to ask some questions too. I know from the feedback from the middle and high school PLCs from last year, and just knowing this from being in professional development myself, it's all about how it's presented, how it's being led, all of that sort of thing. So 2 questions. Are PLC leaders given any kind of training to help them with that? And also, how are the topics being chosen? Is it handed down to them, or is it something that is organic to that particular school, or is it a little mix of both?
Let me see if one of our PLC leaders is here. So our department supervisors that lead that work, they are not in the audience. But what I will say is that our PLC leaders are, this is an extra leadership opportunity. It's a compensated opportunity. And so the expectation is that PLC leaders work in partnership with content supervisors. The expectation is that they co-construct what the needs are. And so the PLC leaders are really the voice of the teachers. And so what should be taking place in an effective PLC is that we are honoring the voice of what the teachers need, and the data and the level of support and resources from our content supervisors is supposed to follow suit. And so that's what we're going to be working towards.
Dr. McDowell, you said that this this endeavor of bringing back these PLC days was teacher-driven. So when you say that, so were the teachers at the table as well when you said everyone had a seat at the table, or was it administrative groups? Who was at the table to decide to implement this plan?
So our academic team, as well as our association leaders, are who talk about the schedules, they talk about the calendars, they determine whether or not we're able to move forward as it relates with PLCs. That's generally how it has been done in years past, and that's the practice that we've continued.
And was it so they said that they needed this time, but did everyone collaborate and make the determination that they needed the 9 additional days? Was that something that was collaborative as well?
So the instructional model that Collingswood has been using for the last several years is the Connected Action Roadmap, which is dependent on data analysis and professional learning communities. And so that's what we had been doing for multiple years. And so I am not, I came late to the party in 2021. And so there were established systems around our academic planning that we were reintroducing in the 21-22 school year based on pre-existing practices. And so the content around the PLCs, initially what was proposed was twice a month, every single month. Feedback from faculty and staff was that that was too much time. And so they looked at, over the course of the year, at least once a month. Sometimes it's twice a month, depending on if they skip a month. And so it translated into nine collective days, 18 hours.
And just one more question. You had said before, but I just wanted to clarify that these schedules or what the different groups are going to be working on within the different buildings, it's going to be up to them to decide what their needs are. You've been saying examining data. What kind of data are you talking about? Is it up to the teachers, like they're going to be looking at maybe assessments or things like that that are happening at the building level, or is there going to be directives from the top down on how the schedule is going to be for those days? Like this month I want to see this, and this month I want to see that. Is it going to be something like that, or is it building led?
So that's not that is, when you look at what leads to an effective PLC, top down is not what the data shows us.
Oh no, I'm aware of that.
Right.
But I'm sure, I know a lot of teachers in a lot of districts, and sometimes it is dictated to them what they're going to do, and other times it is, it's left to them. So I guess I was wondering what is going to be the expectation here?
My general philosophy, and so we have continually been refining our concept of site-based leadership. What site-based leadership dictates and demands is that the individuals that are closest to the challenge are best positioned to provide more meaningful solutions. And so in a perfect world, PLCs would be driven based on what the school is saying that their needs are. Our job at the district level is to provide them protected time in order to do the work that they say, and to get them the data that they say that they need in order to make better decisions. And so that's what I'm going to be holding content supervisors accountable for. Making sure that schools have what they need, when they need it, to be able to drive instruction month after month.
I have one more question. Regarding the supplemental calendar, is there a way that we can merge those two calendars together to make it, less confusing for, parents to sort of look at the calendar and put all their dates in, and then go to the supplemental calendar and put all the dates in there? Is there a way that we can streamline that process?
Yeah, I met with Fred and his assistant Anita, because I looked at it like from the Van Lake as a parent, and I drew the little lines on all the calendars, and I went to Fred, and that does look a little daunting. So I said, there's got to be a way that maybe we can. In years past, there always was one document, and then I guess post-COVID got to we approved the board calendar, and then the supplement came like later. So I think we need to work on possibly doing them at the same time, so it's only like it's one clean document. It's even a little, we just want it to be easy to understand. I think that's part of the confusion when it's hard to understand, so yeah, we did have that meeting this morning just to kind of start the legwork on that.
Is that something that might be taking place in the next year? I mean, obviously this year's already done, but are we looking to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that, to be clear, because I did look through all the calendars, and I agree, like it's hard to line those things up. What I will mention is that pre-COVID, none of the calendars included any supplemental days or the elementary conference half days, and so you would have to line those up yourself too. So I think it seems like we're partway there. Hopefully we can get full way there for next year. Yeah.
So I heard Dr. McDowell, you say that this year was kind of a year to assess the balance that we have to strike, right, between providing teachers with the much needed time to do the work in the PLCs, but also meeting the needs of families for whom childcare is a very real consideration, particularly for those of us with little ones. So I wanted to know sort of how you're going to be assessing that this year. Maybe if you have any thoughts that you could share with us about what you're going to be looking for, who you're going to be talking with, anything that would give us a sense that this is something we are actively trying to balance.
So I believe it's important that we look at this from a couple of different lenses. One, are there more effective ways in order to schedule the time to eventually eliminate the need for the half-days? And so we're going to be digging into that question this year. Paired with that, how do we also build the capacity for childcare within our community exclusive to any new initiative that may disproportionately affect families in Collingswood with younger children? And so we're going to be looking at it from both of those lenses. And then we're going to look at the effectiveness of our PLCs to determine how much time is needed for teachers to have the time, the protected time that they need, and then scale appropriately based on the data and based on the feedback coming from our faculty in order to try to strike the right balance of total time and increasing opportunities for both child care and eventually the need to eliminate early dismissals altogether if we can create schedules that allow for both to happen.
And I just wanted to add that in our previous discussions as a board around any of this, it wasn't just a child care issue, it was also instructional time. And so as we go forward with these conversations, because I know we've had those conversations in the past, and I feel like tonight it just kind of came out about child care, and just wanted to put that back on our conversation list and let the public know that that's on our radar as well. But that being said, as you know, as we balance that, I'm, of course, as we all are, in full support of teachers being treated as professionals. So just want to make sure that they feel that way, and it's not an additional task being put on them, but it's a meaningful task.
Will there be, what will the opportunities for feedback from teachers in the PLCs look like? Are you envisioning a quarterly check-in, even more than that? Like, what is that going to look like, do you think?
So we have, we've repositioned, we've been using what's called a continuous improvement guide. And so all of our administrators have a month-by-month continuous improvement guide that looks holistically at the year, broken down into whether they're elementary or whether they're secondary. And so we have repositioned or redesigned those continuous improvement guides aligned with the marking periods. And so we would be looking at the end of the first trimester to have collected data and make some adjustments for the second trimester if we find that what we have in place is insufficient at the elementary level. At the secondary level, we're looking at the first marking period. And so that would be the first interval where we're building up to, we're collecting data to determine the effectiveness and course correcting when necessary.
I have a two-part question. Part A, are we using different terms for basically the same training that we're performing? And B, how do our neighbors perform this training when they seem to have fewer half-days? And when I say that, I'm only going by what I saw in Facebook. So if those people were wrong, shame on them. But
let's give Bill a round of applause for being on Facebook. I am not on Facebook, and so I'm not privy to that environment. When you say using different words, can you clarify?
Development days and professional learning days and professional learning community.
Right.
Now, are those two things relatively the same, and we're
No.
just saying different names so that
They
we
are
can
not.
say, well, we need to do both of these?
So let me give you an example. Professional learning or professional development is if I am a math teacher, I am going through into math training. And so we have a new curriculum, and so we're going over the tools, we're going over the standards, we're going over all of the resources to be able to not just learn how to use the tools, but to calibrate on what instruction looks like. A professional learning community might be second grade teachers from across the district coming down and unpacking the standards and looking at how are they going to engage all students with very specific things as dictated by the teachers. And so they're looking at student data, they're sharing best practice, they're looking at the standards, they're identifying additional resources, and they're sharing those so that the collective group of second graders achieves at the highest level possible. And so they're very different. Whereas professional development is driven by content, professional learning communities are driven by the educators that are in the room, what their needs are based on what student need is, and working together, looking at what are they trying to solve for in that smaller space.
And our neighbors are doing what for this training?
Not sure, because I'm not part of our neighbors. And so other neighbors are doing different kinds of training. They have different needs. They have different configurations and setups. And so I would say is that it's important for us to understand the landscape, but we don't make decisions based on what our neighbors are doing.
I'm not asking for that to happen. What I am asking is, you know, we're a small community. Not only Collingswood, but Camden County, northern Camden County is a relatively small community. So if Haddon Township is doing something, it might really be a good idea, but if we don't know about it, we're never going to do that. Audubon may be doing something that's brilliant. And again, if we're not talking to them, we don't know about that. And maybe if we do this cross-pollination, we might find out that we're doing the best thing, and we'll convince them that they should be doing it our way. But we need to talk.
So my leadership networks are pretty faceted, and so there is, we have what I call a Haddon proper superintendent cohort. We meet monthly, and so there's 6 of us. Haddon Township is included in those 6 school districts, Haddonfield, Audubon, and so we meet and we calibrate once a month to talk about best practice, we'll talk about needs, sharing of resources. We also meet monthly with all 23 Camden County school districts. That's generally an information session coming down from the state, not really authentic collaboration time. We also participate as a district in a Rowan Superintendent Leadership Academy, which takes superintendents from across the state really looking at problems of practice. And so we're all really struggling with some of the same things. They're just very different ways to be able to address the same issues. And so, and then my 4th network is the New Jersey Alliance of Black Superintendents, which is 33 school districts across the state. And so I have 4 different networks of superintendents that I meet with on a monthly basis, in addition to our curriculum leaders in Collingswood who meet with the curriculum consortium at the county level monthly, and then our content leaders who meet with content folks monthly. And so we're all looking to build by borrowing what are the best practices within the region.
And I also just think that, you know, Oakland did this, for instance, the way that they have cut down on some of their early dismissal days is that they changed the start time for teachers, which is a bit more complicated in our district when we have more than just one grade level school, as well as our 5 small elementary schools make us a bit unique. I know some districts meet during the day because they're literally all in one building, and that makes it a bit easier than a place like us that are more spread out. And other districts as well. I believe Cherry Hill had their start time or something like that. Mary was talking about this, for elementary at least, is different as well, to make time for the PLCs. So those are options that I guess we can talk to the associations about, but that's not something that we're willing to just unilaterally do without them being okay with it as well.
Yep, just to
Yeah.
say there that, so yeah, the Cherry Hill start time was pushed back, and at the elementary level, teachers come in and have their PLCs early, but that was something that had to be negotiated and agreed to by the union.
Yeah, thank you. That's what, I knew there was more detail, so I appreciate it, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions that they'd like to make before we wrap this up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I was going to kind of try to make sure, you know, overall it seems like the point is that there is a very real and beneficial use to this time in the PLCs. I got a chance to look at the survey also from last year's PLCs, and it seemed for a lot of teachers and a lot of PLCs that was very effective time. And the idea behind the PLCs is to help teachers address the individual needs of their kids, right? But being able to balance that with the fact that we are losing instructional time, and we are, and on top of that, there is a child care need where when you have that inconsistent sort of schedule, it makes it difficult. And it seems like that is really the rub, is trying to make sure that our teachers, our educators have that time, that protected time to do the work together to support their kids as best as possible, and also making sure we keep kids in the classroom as much as possible. And I think what Reagan said, and what Megan said about, there's a lot of different options that we can explore. I was on the board, and I don't think you were here, Dr. Mendel. The last time I think the agreement with CA was looked at was by Dr. Oswald, and so I do wonder if the teachers and administrators, would have suggestions in terms of how to, figure out the best way to have this PLC time protected for teachers to figure out how best to serve their kids while also, maximizing instruction time. And that's definitely a discussion that the district can't have on its own, but has to have with all the other parties, right? The CEA, the teachers, the administrators, and the families. And it seems like it's a really difficult problem, but definitely something that's good for us to talk through so that we can figure out what works best for our community.
I just want to add, looking again at the feedback from last year, the importance of a strong PLC leader, and emphasizing that. If we're going to make the ask of the time and really invest in this, making sure that we're investing in those leaders and they're getting the support they need to make that time effective, and asking them how to best do that, because I think having a really strong leader in there, I think, helps to grow not only them as leaders, but then everybody in their group, and making it a useful time.
So Roger helped to summarize, so I appreciate that, to wrap this up this evening. But, we are very aware that this is a complicated situation, and we are continuing to reassess as the year goes on, to see what other configurations of the schedule, or the calendar can look like for next year. With that, can I get a motion to exit Committee of the Whole?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to Section 5, future dates and miscellaneous information. Just want to turn your attention to all of the remaining back-to-school nights, as well as next Monday is closed for Yom Kippur. There are some PTA events and meetings, as well as, it's not on here because I'm still negotiating with the library because their hours changed from the last time I was aware of it, so I didn't want to put it on here yet, but October 12th, which is a Thursday, is when our first board roundtable discussion will happen at the library, but I didn't want to put it on here and not have the time be accurate, so an email with more information will go out once we actually have all of the accurate information for that one. Moving on to Section 6, routine business. Motion to approve the minutes of the August 28th, 2023 regular board meeting. And a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. This brings us to our first opportunity for public comment. The purpose for this public comment section is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the meeting. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. The intent of public comment is to give the community the opportunity to provide feedback to the board. We will be actively listening and taking notes so that we can take all that is being said into consideration. If appropriate, clarifying comments may be made at the end of the public comment section. For more detailed responses to concerns, communication may go out later in the week by the appropriate staff members or administrators, or be discussed by the board during future committee meetings. Members of the public are welcome to speak and expected to do so with the utmost sensitivity for everyone in attendance. In fairness to all who wish to speak, there's a strict 5-minute time limit per person during public comment. Please remember to state your name and address for the record. We are potentially trying out a new timing system.
It's too aggressive.
No, Matt's not ready for it. Megan graciously offered us one from the classroom. I think we're going to test it out just to make sure it's not too aggressive, aggressively yelling at you to stop talking. So it's on him to give you the 1-minute warning instead.
Matt, I'll totally do it. It's my timer, so. I thought it would be helpful for community members to see the time.
Physically see.
So that to kind of keep track.
If anyone feels pressure from the clock, tell me and I will keep on my phone. Happy to differentiate there.
All right, we're going to differentiate for those that wish to have a clear timer and those that do not. So anyway, anyone who would like to come and speak, please state your name and address for the record.
Wayne Rossi, 114 East Palmer Ave. So I was able to get and read the anti-racism policy that the board put forward for this evening. On the whole, I think it's a very positive thing that this move's being made. I think that, you know, there is no such thing as not being racist. One has to be anti-racist and actively opposed and actively working to foster, especially in a district like ours, to foster diversity and inclusion. That said, I do have a couple of notes. I think that, first of all, I think that a lot of how this is going to play out in practice is going to depend on the tools, and I don't think that there was a lot on that end in the policy as written. I think particularly with regard to giving teachers materials and resources and training, that's going to be a very important part of how this policy plays out in practice. The second thing, and I think, you know, like a lot of the attention that was drawn at the beginning of the meeting was very welcome, is how this integrates cultural festivals, different designated history months. I actually think that would be a positive thing just as a part of this. You know, I know it was a fairly big deal that, like, you know, there hadn't been a comprehensive plan like before Black History Month last year. So I'd like to see that we make sure that happens. The third thing, I thought that there was a lot of good points on reforming discipline and making sure that academics are there for students of color. I also think that it would be great if one of the goals was to positively encourage the leadership of students of color through different school programs, and that could be a way that this sort of doesn't just look at necessarily the classroom, but wraps through all of academic life. The fourth point, I found looking at other anti-racism type policies, I had found one that did a really good job with working in how this relates to social and emotional learning. And I think that making sure that this interlinks with other parts of policy is really important. And my fifth point was that they also, the other thing that I really liked in theirs was that there was a lot of community outreach. And I think it's important in doing a policy like this that it involves the broader community more, and it doesn't feel like something that's being foisted by the school board on people's kids, you know, because I think it should be part of a broader environment. So yeah, I do think it's really important, you know, that this has like the reporting requirement in it. I think that's really cool. I would almost appreciate more than like once a year, you know, but I do think that it needs a few more moving parts to make sure that this goes successfully, because I'm really committed to this being a successful policy. I think it, like I said, I think it's really good. I think that there are some notes to make. And I'm just trying to think, because I have another minute and you guys are going to take away, you know, take it down to 3 next time. But I think that's all I had for this evening. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, wait, don't move. I forgot my glasses.
I am so sorry. I really thought the timer would be helpful.
No.
So people know how much.
I
It was
love
really
the
meant to be a
timer.
good thing.
That's way less aggressive than what I do in my classroom, which is projected on the board. So it's great. Okay. Hi, my name is Robin Hogan, 247 Wyoming Avenue. I'm the president of the Collingswood Education Association. And I just want to take a couple minutes to introduce myself as president of the CEA and to speak about the state of our union. Throughout the school year, the CEA leadership intends to share regular State of the Union updates with the Board of Education and the general public to highlight the accomplishments of our members and communicate concerns that arise. The CEA is made up of over 250 members that consist of not just teachers, but teachers, instructional assistants, nurses, administrative assistants, counselors, social workers, psychologists, speech therapists, and occupational therapists. We are diverse in composition, yet we are united in purpose. We share an unwavering dedication to all of our students. As an organization, we have two guiding principles that direct our words and actions. Our CEA members will use its voice as educational experts to, number one, ensure a high-quality educational experience for all of our students, and to promote staff retention. We value our strong relationship with the community, one that is built on trust, cooperation, and mutual respect, and our relationship with parents and guardians is very strong. However, at this time, our relationship with the central administration and board does have a shadow looming over it. In the spirit of trust and mutual respect, it is important that an event from last spring be addressed. On April 25th, 2023, the CEA and the CPSA, which is the Collingswood Principals and Supervisors Association, collaborated together to write a letter to the board sharing our concerns regarding the 23-24 budget. So think about that. The CEA worked together with I gotta get this right, CPSA to share our concerns with the board. Okay, so the letter was sent to Dr. McDowell, Ms. Coleman, Ms. McPartland, and Ms. Caden. Neither the CEA nor the CPSA received any type of acknowledgement of this letter, and to our surprise, the letter wasn't shared with all of the members of the board until Dr. McMullen brought it to their attention. The 23-24 budget has been put into place, and the effects of this budget and the concerns that were expressed by us will come to fruition this year. Communication between our organizations will be more important than ever. To be very clear, the CEA wants to have a relationship of trust and mutual respect with our board and superintendent. However, in the lingering silence of your response to our communication, we are left to draw our own conclusion. And what remains are questions. Does the board value or respect feedback from our members? And how will our organization communicate when the need arises? As you consider these questions, the community, though, they can rely on the CEA to use its voice and influence as educational experts and dedicated professionals to work to ensure a high-quality educational experience for all of our students and to strive to continuously improve working conditions in support of our members in order to promote staff retention. After all, working conditions are our students' learning conditions, and we want the best for our students, staff, and community. I look forward to working with you in my new role. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Beth Ann Rogers. I live at 584 Washington Terrace, Audubon. I am the secondary VP for the CEA. And as Ms. Hogan said, we are going to highlight and go along with what Dr. McDowell started off with tonight with the wonderful opening of the school this year. So we have some good news to share. On Tuesday, September 12th, preschool held its back to school night, and it was a huge success. Collingswood's preschool is housed in 4 different locations. Altogether, 28 CEA staff members consisting of teachers, aides, and nurses and administrative assistants welcomed 197 parents into their buildings and classrooms. At October's meetings, we look forward to sharing the good news about the elementary, middle, and high school back-to-school nights as well, some of which have already occurred. Also, another shout out to the elementary music staff for another successful round of instrument demonstration assemblies. We are so proud to live in a community that actively supports the arts and education. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leah Foreman, 501 South Vineyard, Collingswood. I also came to speak about the anti-racism policy. I wanted to thank the board for creating this policy. I think it's a great jumping off point, but I also, like Wayne, have a couple of notes and things that I'd like to see in the policy. One is that the policy, it's great to have 3 clear goals for this year. I think that doesn't overwhelm people and gives us a good starting off point. I do think the policy needs to be more robust. I think things need to be more explicitly outlined in terms of making this a welcoming, inclusive environment. I think these things are already happening. I just think it's great to have it in writing. I also think that this policy misses the intersectionality of the LGBTQI community, and I think that that's also something that's really important to have in an anti-racism policy. But I'm grateful that we have a starting point, we have something to work from, and I think overall it's a good place to start. But I've looked at some other anti-racism policies that are much longer and much broader, and I think that that gives people less wiggle room and would help us shape the community that we really want to see. And I'll just give back the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to everyone for public comment. Moving on to Section 8, the Superintendent's Report. Dr. McDowell.
Okay, attached for you in Section 8 is the enrollment report, the school safety drill report, the suspension report, or lack thereof, and the anti-bullying report. And 8.05 are just a few topics that we'd like to highlight in keeping with moving forward. And so just wanted to reiterate again is that all of our schools successfully welcome back students for the 23-24 school year. The first marking term or the first trimester in elementary land is dedicated to truly establishing relationships while just setting high expectations. All schools will continue with our district-wide focus to provide targeted, personalized learning experiences for students, and while emphasizing positive school culture, coordinated visits and learning walks will begin in October after all schools have submitted and updated their learning acceleration plans. Want to reiterate again, Hispanic and Latin American Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th. And so in our schools, we're celebrating this month in various ways. Preschool coaches are working to share age-appropriate resources with our teachers, in addition to highlighting some of the resources already incorporated or integrated within our preschool creative curriculum that can be used not just this month but throughout the school year. Our elementary media specialist is working alongside principals in order to provide age-appropriate materials for teachers to be able to use in their classrooms, and our elementary teachers are also sharing their own list of age-appropriate materials on each of their campuses. Our schools are celebrating through read-alouds while incorporating displays of books by various authors and content centered around this beautiful culture. Additional books will be introduced into school libraries and classrooms throughout the month and throughout the remainder of the school year. The Library Media Center at the secondary campus has also curated a series of resources to be used among faculty and staff, in addition to our history and social studies teachers in middle and high school are using specific content aligned with the standards within their curricula. And so our middle school and high school multilingual learners are working on special projects about their families, their personal narratives, their cultures, and their backgrounds, with bulletin boards and displays set up across our campuses, in addition to the recognition of this month through various activities being conducted through our world language department and teachers, and daily recognition on our Pause TV news channel to start the day every day. And so, although not specific to this particular month, Collingswood schools include a wide variety of cultures and diversity within their curriculum, which includes but is not limited to Latinx and Hispanic themes throughout the year. And so we want to continue to be a diverse and inclusive, not just in our outward expression, but also within our curriculum. I'd like to provide a quick pitch for CPAG, which is our Special Education Parent Advisory Group. They are seeking special education parents and caregivers, students, educators, and community members interested in disability advocacy in order to increase their membership. CPAG is a parent-led volunteer group that works collaboratively with the school district to advise on issues related to special education in Collingswood and Oak Lynn, with a goal of being involved and to help improve outcomes for all students. Their next meeting is Wednesday, September 20th from 6:30 to 7:30, right next door in the middle school library media center on the 3rd floor. And so notice of that meeting will also be sent out again this week. Wanted to provide a quick update on the DEI action items that began last school year. Our strategic goal for Vision 2026 is further integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts into district culture by dismantling negative stigmas between elementary school communities, prioritizing sustainable pathways to diversify our educator pipelines, and develop the cultural competencies of faculty, staff, and administration. Restorative justice training started at the end of last year. Part 1, which is focused on community building, started last year, and Part 2 will be scheduled this fall with cohorts of middle and high school faculty and staff. The Board of Education has also been participating in this capacity building. And so 2 of 3 sessions have been completed. Laying the foundation was completed in May. Setting the vision was completed in August. And strategic plan development, and this is for you, Wayne, strategic plan development will be in the 3rd session. And so we will get more granular and more explicit, Leah, after that session. And so what you have this evening for a September 18th first read is the board's anti-racism and equity policy. The board has been working on this policy for months because getting feedback from the community, getting feedback from schools, and really curating what are best practices in this particular area based on the needs here in Collingswood. And so in addition to that, there are a series of policies that complement the anti-racism policy that will be under review and revised after we have an approved anti-racism policy, which includes student discipline and code of conduct, cell phone policy, substance abuse, drug screening, affirmative action for schools and classroom practices, employee training, equal educational opportunity, equality in educational programs, attendance, Section 504, and the list continues to go on. And so there is a cadence of how policy development takes place. And so we want to make sure that we are being very thoughtful and intentional as we roll out policies, but it really starts with the board's commitment to moving in this work. And so we are also using data collected in June around equity mindset among faculty and staff, which is focused on the knowledge, skills, and beliefs. And that will be used to guide in stage 1, middle school and high school equity councils, which are faculty and staff in each of the schools who will be participating in foundations training, coaching training, and they will be leading the launch and the rollout of the learning modules across their campuses. And so we believe that the best way to create or build capacity is to be led by faculty and staff within the buildings. And so that work will be starting in October at the secondary level, and it will be starting at the elementary level after we've worked with our association leaders in the second half of the school year. And so we want to make sure that we have a successful launch at the secondary level first, and then move into elementary second. October 11th will be our 3rd PSAT SAT school day. This is also aligned with one of our Vision 2026 strategic goals, which is creating equitable opportunities for Collingswood, Oak Lynn, and Woodland students to reach their full potential through a whole child approach. So as part of our goals, we're going to participate in SAT school day because it provides greater access to these important examinations for students during the school day, while supporting our collective effort to remove barriers associated with college entrance and college and career readiness. And so, as previously discussed in a multitude of meetings and in public forums, we have exceptionally bright students in Collingswood. And it is important to note that 3 out of every 4 Collingswood High School students that are participating in advanced placement courses have earned qualifying scores needed for college credit. And so in this last school year, in the 22-23 school year, Collingswood High School posted its highest overall participation and performance in advanced placement courses within the last 5 years. And so we're moving in the right direction. And the expectation moving forward is for the district to continue to work with our high school administrative team to ensure that all students are afforded the opportunity for access to rigorous courses aligned to two things: their interest and their demonstrated capacity to be successful. These discussions will also help to inform the upcoming Program of Study Fair and the Program of Study Student Survey in October. And so new for this year, our high school team will be working to develop a way to promote all of its academic programs and services to help students make informed decisions prior to being surveyed for the 24-25 school year. Once surveyed, student voice will be the primary driver for what courses are offered for the 24-25 school year. This also supports our strategic goals of increasing opportunities for student influence on culture, climate, and student life. So please stay tuned for PSAT, SAT School Day details that will be coming from the high school very soon. So far this year, I have had the pleasure and the opportunity to see several of our sports teams do their thing. I've been to the football team scrimmage. I've seen volleyball matches, field hockey games, and our girls soccer team. And so I would just like to publicly acknowledge that our student athletes are working extremely hard to balance their schoolwork as well as their commitment to their teammates. And so our students, they're at school all day, and then they're in practice or at games until late into the evening, and then they still have their schoolwork, and they're getting it done. And so we'd also like to thank all of our coaches, our team volunteers, and our team boosters for their efforts to support our students. We're looking to an amazing athletic season this fall. And as a former student athlete and the son of a teacher who was a football, basketball, and track coach, I am especially looking forward to our Panthers excelling on and off the field. And that concludes my update for this month.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. Section 9, the student reports. We do not have student board members yet because the elections for them are happening this week. Is that correct? This week or next week. They will be ready to join us for the October meeting. Section 10, the Business Administrator Board Secretary report. Ms. Coleman.
I apologize, but due to the timing of the board meetings being so early and me having some staff out of my office, I don't have the financial statements ready, but we're still in compliance with the state law, so probably next month you'll probably have 2 months worth of financial statements. But with that being said, in item 10.05, I do have a listing of the purchase orders that I've issued for the month of September. And in 10.06 is a listing of the warrants that will be paid tomorrow morning after your approval this evening. And that's it.
Thank you. Section 11, Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee. Mr. Craig will present.
Sure. The Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee reviews all financial statements, purchase orders, and warrants on a monthly basis. The committee also reviews and approves all contracts with outside service providers and oversees all maintenance and capital improvement projects district-wide. Very short agenda today, and as Ms. Coleman just acknowledged, we have a abbreviated board secretary report. So just looking for approval on the POs and the warrants. 1104 is the annual operating procedures that are updated each year from Ms. Coleman's office, and then 11.5 through 11.7 are use of facility requests, one for a wrestling camp, the other for the Good News Club at a Sharp, and then the Collingswood Youth Theater. So looking for approval of items 11.2 to 11.7.
Motion to approve said items.
So moved.
And a second. Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Yes. Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia? Yes. Mr. Stotts?
Excuse me, yes, but I'm staying on number 11.03, I believe it is. Yes, 1103.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Section 12, the Curriculum Committee. Mr. Chu will present.
The Curriculum Committee oversees and approves the district curriculum and assessment programs, as well as field trips, home instruction, co-curricular programs, and the school calendar. There are a number of field trips up for approval in 12.02 and 12.03 for middle school and high school, and those are, I believe, mostly, if not all, for the MD program. There is a out-of-district home instruction placement for 12.04, and 12.05 is the approval for the 2023-24 senior class trip to Orlando, Florida. And that's from June 4th to June 8th. And so we're seeking approval for items 12.02 through 12.05.
Motion to approve said items.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, question on the senior trip. Is this the same trip that's been going on in the past, or is this a new trip, a different location?
Same trip.
Yeah, the same.
Same trip. Mhm.
And
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I just wanted to bring up part of the discussion that we had in committee was about the cost and trying to figure out how to support the cost of this trip for students who may wish to go, but may find the cost difficult. And so that was part of the discussion, and hopefully there are some fundraising opportunities that we can develop, as a class or through a school.
I know I brought this up to a few people as well. Perhaps an option could be starting a payment plan where families can begin payments freshman year. So instead, because this is my first rodeo this year with the senior trip, and earlier this week it's like, okay, so you've got this amount of money due in 1 month, and I get it. It is an expensive trip, but perhaps spreading that out. So instead of 3 payments, we could up it to maybe 7 or 8, and that might help this trip be a little bit less cost prohibitive for certain families.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaden?
Yes. Section 13 is the Personnel Committee. Ms. Sheridan Celia will present.
The Personnel Committee reviews all recommendations for teaching and staff employment, considers co-curricular employment, and considers all professional development opportunities for staff members. At item 13.02, Ms. Johnson, Linda Johnson, is retiring from the high school as the high school athletics secretary, and we thank her very much for her service. We have a resignation at 13.03. We have various leaves requested at 13.04 to 13.08. We have an unpaid leave of absence for a brief time at 13.09. The appointment of a math teacher at 13.10. 13.11 is a transfer. The appointment of a elementary special ed teacher at 13.12. 13.13 is the appointment of a long-term substitute and replacement teacher, and another one at 13.14. 13.15 are 2023-2024 high school permanent building substitutes. 13.16, the elementary lunchtime playground assistants, there was a transfer. At item 13.17, we have the curriculum developments project. There was a revision in the people conducting this work. 13.18 through 13.21 are the appointment of various PLC leaders at the high school, middle school, district, and elementary levels. Item 13.22 is the appointment of this academic year's after-school mental health staff. 13.23 is the appointment of additional athletic coaches for this year, or the athletic coaches. The football coaches have had some turnover. 13.24, the appointment of athletic event personnel. At item 13.25, for this academic year, there's non-athletic stipends. 13.26, the appointment of 2 substitutes and or tutors. 13.27 is the travel expense form. There's a few New Jersey-based activities that some people are going into in this month. And that concludes my relatively short agenda for this month. So I'm seeking approval of items 13.02 to 13.28. 27. Thank you, Roger.
Motion to approve said items.
So moved.
And a second. Questions or comments from board members?
I just had one comment, Christine. The after-school mental health, can you just explain what that means?
What item are we on?
That's
sorry,
actually,
13.22?
Chris, I could
Yeah, I
take
could
that real
probably do
quick.
that too, yeah.
Yeah, that's for the support staff, so it's having someone there to welcome people in the waiting room, so that they're not just sitting there with no one while another person is being seen.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes, except 1311 where I abstain.
Ms. Henry,
Yes.
Mrs. Maya,
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski,
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia,
Yes.
Mr. Stotts,
Yes, except for those items marked with a double asterisk where I abstain.
Mrs. Caden.
Yes. Section 14, Culture, Climate, and Policy Committee. I will present for Ms. Savarino, who is at her own back-to-school night this evening. The Policy and Regulations Committee reviews all updates and changes of district policies and regulations. As we've already talked about tonight, we have a first reading for our brand-new anti-racism and equity policy. We appreciate all the feedback, and as Dr. McDowell said, this is something that we've been working towards for quite some time and wanted to make sure that we were fully ready for it before presenting it for a first read. 14.03, we have three policies up for a second read: public participation, elementary eligibility, of resident, non-resident students, and unpaid meal charges and outstanding food service charges. So we need approval for items 14.02 and 14.03 this evening. Is there a motion to approve said items?
Moved.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, a couple of comments on, 0167, the public participation. We keep saying that we're trying to get more public participation, that we want people to talk to us, and yet we're cutting down the time. Doesn't seem appropriate. I mean, we had 4 presentations that took an hour and a half tonight. If you want to cut something down, reduce some of the presentations. Don't reduce the public comment portion.
I think the goal of it was to align ourselves with what other districts do, but also to allow for at times when we have many people waiting to be able to comment, that it allows them the time to do it. And as we saw with our fancy new timer, I don't know that most people took up
And
the
he
5
did an
minutes.
excellent job. Very well tonight.
So the goal was to be able to have as many people as they needed to. I mean, I think I don't know that that's a fair comparison. The presentations that are given to us are often ones that are needed to be given for various reasons. Public participation is also a need, but also something that we're looking to do that's more about engagement than standing up there and speaking to us in a manner in which we can't engage back, are things like the roundtable discussions, so that we can have more of a way to engage with the public than having them talk at us and us not being able to respond.
I understand what you're saying. I understand why for the 2 or 3 nights a year that you might have a huge crowd, which usually means they're upset about something, so we should know about that anyway. Okay, I still don't think it's a good idea to cut it down to 2 or 3
Noted.
nights. The other thing is the meal charges. I understand that that's a problem. Beth Ann keeps reinforcing that for us, so we know it's a problem. But our policy here, we're punishing the kids. We're not punishing the adult that's causing the problem. The kid is the one. He can't go to dances. He may have limited food access. He'll get a meal, but he may have limited access to what he can get. He won't get his report card if there's an outstanding balance. We're going after the wrong people. We should be aggressively pursuing the parents where this is a problem. Small claims court, I don't think, is available to the Board of Education, but a collection agency is. And if we have to turn this over to a collection agency, so be it. At least that way the kid's not being punished for the transgressions of his parent.
So we have talked about this extensively in the policy committee, and it was very important to all of us to not have this be a punitive situation for students. There are other school districts that do that, and we were not in agreement with it. So we did put into place, I don't really know what he's talking about, because I didn't think that was in this particular policy.
It references the other board policy
potential
with the care and
use.
upkeep of, like, I forgot the policy number, but it deals with the fines.
So
If you have book fines or
okay,
lost.
that's, okay, good. So
It
then my memory is
references that
correct.
one, because that's the only policy that really says, like, if you have a lost textbook or the fines, if you don't
Right.
pay your fines, this is what could happen.
So
I don't
right,
know that
so-
anybody's ever, but
Mr. Stotts, one of the things
Yeah.
that we discussed, thank you I thought I was right, but I wanted to be sure. So the policy that we're talking about right here, we were very intentional about making sure that we did not make it punitive to students. We did actually add in language instead, and correct me, anyone else on the policy committee, if I am misremembering this, but instead we added language that required more meetings, more in-person meetings with the parents for the exact reason that you're talking about, because the student should not be the one that there are consequences for it. It should more be the parents, although we're not really all that comfortable with taking them to small claims court either.
If you're trying not to punish the kids, you missed.
Okay.
Because the way the policy reads, you're punishing the kid.
Well, it is the second read of the policy, and that would have been really useful feedback last session.
Okay.
But to be fair, this is consistent with, and I understand they're not punishing the kids, but it does come into this, yes, we run the cafeteria, but it is not part of the budget, and people get confused. I pay taxes, I shouldn't have to pay for these things. Cafeteria is something that we have to run like a business, and I can't really run it into a deficit, because it's in the accountability regulations with the Department of Ed that it's frowned upon for a school district to have a line item in their budget to bail out the cafeteria. It's like a red flag to the state that something's wrong. So we're kind of in that hard spot coming back post-COVID, where people still think that lunches are free and they are not. And the state is going to deem, if you're not eligible for a free or reduced lunch, that it is a parental responsibility and not a school district responsibility. Underscore, not a school district responsibility. It's more encouraging them to talk to the principal and to talk to us, and we can do payment plans, we can work with families. I've never not fed a child, but to not pay and to ignore and to continue to let the charges grow, which was a habit last year, it just needs to stop. And this is a problem statewide. I got myself put on a committee at my state association. I know we've spoken to the governor's office. He has a task force now on food insecurity. I know he's looking into hopefully doing what other states are doing and just feeding everybody for free, so I can get out of this business of trying to figure this out every year. But I don't know that they're there yet, but I know that he's looking into it, because this is a problem across the board. Post-COVID, it's just hard to get the participation. And we are pretty lenient. Like, if the principal knows that there's a problem at home, they can fill the application out for the child, and then I'm not chasing people down, because I don't want to be that person. But we do have to, after reading all the policies, we did have to loop in, because that's the one thing we can say to the parents is like, well, the only thing left is report card or diploma, and we weren't referencing our own policy that says that you have the right to do that. So all we did was clean it up.
Ms. Colvin, can you just keep us posted as the year goes on this issue? I mean, I
Yes.
understand going off of COVID, the lunch was free for 2 years?
Yeah.
So people, 1 year, they were getting used to it, so hopefully the message is getting across. And I just have one question. Is there standards in place for each school so that this is being addressed at each level, school level, same? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there marching orders for every school, how to deal with this?
Well, the marching orders have always been the same. And it's an uncomfortable situation, but the board policy reads that it's the superintendent or the designee. We usually rope in the main office staff. And we do communicate very regularly. We do try to email the parents, phone calls when appropriate. This year, we put it in Genesis, like as part of, you go into Genesis and you update your student information. It's right there for you. Fill it out right in the thing, and it says whether you don't want to apply or apply, you can do it right in the system. We are trying to make it a lot easier. But yeah, we are in constant communications with the main offices. But unfortunately, nobody wants to have these conversations. They're not comfortable.
This is just from a tech standpoint, but I know that I tried to log in this morning to pay for lunch for Nicholas, who wanted pizza today, and I had a heck of a time trying to figure that out. So I feel like I'm not I'm pretty technologically impaired generally, but I feel like that should be an easier process to figure out in terms of like logging on and making that happen. So I do think that, one thing that we can work on, and I did bring this up last year, is making sure that it's easy, it's user-friendly, it's, something that people can log on, it's very simple to do. And also, I know that there were a lot of instances last year where people were somehow not receiving the emails that.
And we did correct that. But again, technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't work, it blows up. But our systems are supposed to sync at night between the student database system and our lunchtime system. It's supposed to sync. There was a few weeks in there where the sync wasn't happening, and it's not like I get an alert and say sync didn't happen. I'm assuming the sync is happening. So once I heard your complaint went in, I found out a lot of times the sync wasn't happening, right?
And just another sidebar on that conversation is that I think that the lunch menu online and the lunch menu on paper do not match up, so that's something that we should look to kind of make sure that those two are lining up as well. Because I was looking online and I'm like, I swear in the paper it said pizza day on Monday, but that wasn't listed online for the school.
And
I think so. I didn't follow up again this day. I didn't hear any complaints.
And to clarify, in the revised policy, it says over and over and over again that the student will always be fed.
Correct. We can't not, right.
No, I think it literally says the student will always be fed. It's basically parent will be notified at this point, student will be fed. Parent will be notified at this point, student will be fed. And so it's over and over and over again that it says that the student will be fed. So I just want to make sure that is true,
Yes.
right? We're not.
We
leaving
never not feed a hungry
Right.
child.
And so that I think is really important. And then the other thing too is just to make sure is that also in the policy are steps to make sure that families who are eligible for free and reduced lunch are given the application. I think Beth Ann, you mentioned potentially the school administrators can help with that application, right? Just to make sure that those resources are being utilized by students and families who qualify for them, right? And so the idea here is, and I don't know exactly the thresholds for designation for free and reduced lunch, right? But the idea here is that ideally with that in place, at least the most, I guess, we'll say neediest of our students, most food insecure of our students won't actually ever hit this regulation because their lunches will be paid for by state and federal aid, right? And so this is mainly for folks who build up a bill otherwise. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then again,
And I think part of the issues with the charges too is the income eligibility guidelines with how the federal government tells us to determine who gets free lunch. Those income eligibility guidelines change every single year.
Right.
So it's something you have to explain to parents. I filled it out last year. We have to fill it out again this year because it changes every year. So it's just continuing to reinforce, when in doubt, fill out an application. You know, it's just helpful. Yeah.
And then this is my own platform to say that I wish the federal government would just keep on paying, just
Is
feed
there a
everyone lunch.
timeline?
I 100% agree.
Is there a timeline that they have to fill out the application by, in January, for example, if they
They can fill it out. They can fill it out anytime. It's preferred they fill it out in the beginning of the school year. That we start the school year, the child's whatever status they were last year, they roll in for the first 30 days in that because we realize it's the beginning of school. Parents are filling out paperwork, but if something happens at home and a parent loses a job, we encourage everybody to fill it out again.
Yeah, Roger, I'm sorry, I did read the policy, but I don't have it in front of me right now. Well, it says the students will be fed. Does it say what the students will be fed? Is this the peanut butter and jelly sandwich routine, or?
No, it's not.
No, it's the meal
It's not.
that is provided.
It says that in there, that they'll get the same meal as everybody else.
Yes, it does not say they're given peanut butter and
Okay.
jelly.
Because I think the goal is not to,
To shame anyone
Right.
for lunch, yes. We were very
Actually
explicit about
against federal law to overtly identify children. So that would be an overt identification.
Right. So the
At
school
school.
district shall not publicly identify or stigmatize a student who cannot pay for a meal or whose school meal bill is in arrears. For example, by requiring the student to sit at a separate table or wear a wristband, hand stamp, or identifying mark, or by serving the student an alternative meal. Those things are not allowed according to the policy as written.
I would assume that the student, every day they offer a meal, like a balanced meal. I'm assuming that the student can just.
Yes.
Just like everybody everybody else.
Just like everybody else.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I believe that is part of the reason why some school lunch bills are being racked up, is that everybody can go up and order a school lunch if they want to the point where I do know of some families where they were packed a lunch and then they were like, that looks really good, I'm going to go get that too.
I got many
So,
an
yeah.
email from parents about that, but if they come up with money, I don't know if they have a pack of lunch.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we're going to
we
feed them.
Screen for that.
Yes, so we
yeah.
feed them.
Right.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Can I just really quick, I know we're going into hour 3 here, just take it back to public comment.
Sure.
Revision. I just wanted to say, Bill, I completely appreciate what you're saying, and obviously, I don't think any of us here, I know I don't, I won't speak for everybody, although I'm pretty sure everybody here agrees, we all want public comment, but personally, I'm cool with the 3 minutes. I've given speeches in front of my Board of Eds many times over the years, and 3 minutes is a good chunk of time. I've given pretty well-prepared, several paragraph-long speeches, so I feel like allowing more people to participate, and it's still like a really good chunk of time. And I just want to say, from personal experience, I feel like 3 minutes is still a nice, solid chunk of time.
But there's no limit on how many people can speak. You can speak all night if you want to. I mean, maybe the meeting goes till 12 o'clock, and I've been to a number of meetings that went past 12 o'clock.
Actually, it's one time at the microphone.
I'm sorry?
It's one time at the microphone for each section. They can't keep coming up, if that's what you meant.
No, yeah, I'm not saying
Yeah,
that.
well, yeah, of course not.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that part's okay, but it's not like somebody's not going to get an opportunity to speak because we allowed the first person to speak 5 minutes, and that didn't leave enough time for the second one, because there is no, other than the time limit for the individual person, there is no
Okay.
Assuming not everybody wants to be here until.
I'm going to move us on because we're at the second reading for these policies, and there was ample time to have discussed and reviewed these policies beforehand. So at this point, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry? Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts? I'm sorry, 0167, and what was the other one? 511? Oh, 8550.
I think he just votes no for
Yeah, you
14
can't,
of them.
yeah, you're just going to vote no then. And Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Section 15, miscellaneous, just a couple of items. 15.01 is just a revision to the 2023-2024 504 compliance officer appointment, changing it from Dr. Whitehouse to,
Yeah, Vesper.
thank you. I was like, wait, why am I seeing a different one? To Ms. Vesper to be the temporary compliance officer from September to October, and then we'll be appointing Kim Hollenbeck as of November 1st. She's our new counseling, director of counseling, when she arrives to us for the remainder of the school year. And then 15.02 is the adoption of the 23-24 Board of Education goals that we discussed at our last meeting, one about community engagement, one about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, Beth Ann, I just have a quick addition of an and that I'll give you later, and culture and climate in schools. So these are just the adoption of the goals that we as a board and district are working towards for this school year. So looking for approval of items 15.02 and 15.01 and 15.02. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second. Questions or comments from board members?
So I just had one comment that I had written you in an email about earlier in terms of, like, I do think it's very important, I don't have it in front of me, but there was language about recruiting and retaining diverse staff, and I think that's really important. I think we should also add a retention plan for all the staff, existing staff that we have now.
Oh, I didn't understand what you meant by that. I got you now. So I think, I hear you. I don't know that falls under DEI, but it can fall under a different kind of goal.
Just thought in terms of, like, board goals in general, I didn't
Right.
see that piece in there.
Right, I hear you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes on 1501 and no on 1502.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Section 16 is our final opportunity for public comment. This is open to any items that people would like to talk about. I'm not going to waste everybody's time. I'm pretty sure everybody that was here when I read it the first time is still here, so you know the deal. In fairness to all who wish to speak, there's a strict 5-minute time limit per person during public comment for this last session. Matt will perhaps use the timer. It's now 3 minutes? We're going to keep it at 5 for right now. We don't need to make Matt any more nervous than he already is about the timer. Please remember to state your name and address for the record. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh.
Becky Mercurio, 524 King Ave. A statement on behalf of the Collingswood Panther Band Boosters. We were devastated to learn the district does not intend to fill the vacancy left by Mr. Lurch's passing last spring. As parents and dedicated community members, we urge you to reverse that decision. Mr. Lurch's sudden passing was an enormous loss for the students he taught, for the staff he mentored, and for the South Jersey music community. We are so grateful to our Collingswood music teachers for banding together in the wake of that loss to ensure all classes were staffed by a member of the department, so students still grieving were taught by teachers who knew them. Supported by these incredible teachers and staff, our kids performed their hearts out for the remainder of the year, and we couldn't be prouder of what they all accomplished together. Our music teachers have gone above and beyond since Mr. Lurch's passing because they are tremendous educators who care about our kids. However, what they did in the face of an emergency is not sustainable. Please do not ask them to continue without needed support. The quality of education will decline, our teachers will burn out, and the music program will suffer, from elementary up through high school. It is not inconceivable that the current approach could be the beginning of the end for the marching band program, as elementary students miss out on foundational skills and the support and development needed to sustain their growth as musicians. Students at all levels of music instruction are negatively impacted by the current structure of the district's music program. It is reprehensible that the district could allow Joe's passing to help balance the budget. We are being told that the numbers are not there to support hiring a replacement for Joe, and that he had not passed away, there could have been cuts to staffing in the department. However, students at the high school are being turned away from instructional music lessons, and the numbers at the elementary level are substantial for the 2.5 teachers assigned to oversee these classes. Thus, we question the validity of such statements. This is a town that prides itself on supporting the arts. That support must be reflected in our schools with a sufficiently staffed music program. Music education has a profound impact on the development of young people. It provides a unique opportunity for kids to express themselves creatively, strengthen their imaginations, and build self-confidence. Additionally, research shows that it supports improvement in grades, attendance, standardized test scores, graduation rates, and social-emotional well-being. Students' involvement in music education and the arts is indeed one of the best avenues for fostering inclusiveness and encouraging acceptance of diversity. Defunding a program that positively contributes to equity and inclusion is short-sighted and irresponsible. We urge you to better support the talented, dedicated music teachers of the Collingswood School District and the community of students who rely on them. Please hire a music teacher to fill the vacancy left by Joe Lurch's passing and protect the foundation of our district's music program. Please honor the legacy Joe built and the tremendous young people it still inspires.
Wayne Rossi, 114 East Palmer Ave. So once again, I want to speak. It wasn't on the agenda, so I didn't want to mention it earlier on. Obviously, we've now hired the school liaison officer. So I know it's probably early to hear any kind of update. I would hope to hear something further on this, soon, how hire is, what's actually happening, what's going on, and whether, this is truly the best use of the board's funds, of the school's funds. I would continue to urge the board to reconsider the policy that currently allows the officer to be armed in the cases when they have to be present with students. I continue to believe that we should not allow guns in our schools under any circumstances. Thank you.
Good evening. Lauren Robbins, 114 Washington Avenue. I have two kids in the district, one in 6th grade and one in 9th grade. I just have three quick things that I wanted to reflect on. One, the conversation earlier about the early dismissals and half-days. It is excessive, the number of early dismissals and half-days that we have, and my kids are grown out of elementary. This is about instructional time. My reflection on the conversation that I heard earlier was that the concept of the PLCs makes a lot of sense, but what I didn't hear coming through in the dialogue was how they're held accountable to the outcomes of that time, so that we can feel as parents and community members, comfortable that that is worth the investment of that much, out of school classroom instructional time. So please do a better job of articulating how you're holding those groups accountable. Secondly, there was a conversation last month's board meeting about the teacher resignations and whether or not exit interviews are performed after. There was some teachers that were in the August meeting that we saw the resignations for that I know had a profound impact on my kids. So when I saw some of those names, I was really disappointed. So I think I heard, and maybe I misunderstood the exchange, that exit interviews are not conducted when teachers leave over the summer. And I found that very puzzling and a little bit concerning. And lastly, I just want to extend the comments that have been made earlier about supporting the music education program and how important that is. I know that there's been comments about low enrollment. I think we need to ask ourselves why that is, and are we doing enough throughout the elementary and younger years to promote kids sticking with music. Thank you.
Christina Seaholster, 120 Pacific Ave in Collingswood. I wanted to further address the issue of the music department because my daughter just graduated this year, and the reason that she's thrived so well and is going to a prestigious college in Manhattan for musical theater is because of our music department. I know you guys are all parents and appreciate that, but the band was huge for her during a very difficult time in her life. So I really would like you to overthink, making that a priority again. So, thank you.
So not seeing anyone else stand up, I just wanted to take a moment to reiterate once again that first, we recognize that the concerns about the music department are also filled with sadness and grief, and that is something that board members are feeling as well, that the district administrators are feeling as well, that everyone that had to make the really tough decisions during the budget cycle last year were feeling as well. This board and district couldn't be prouder of our music and arts programs. Not that it matters, but that many of us on the board have students that either have participated or are currently participating in these programs. it shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter, because those of us that don't still think that the music and arts programs are fantastic, and that the music and arts teachers are some of the most, I think all the teachers are wonderful, but they are really talented, energetic, and engaging teachers, and I am so grateful for all of them. And I know that I am speaking for the full board when I say that. In addition, we only have intentions, and we actually spoke about this when some of us went to the August band booster meeting, of ways to grow that program in the future. And anyway, that, as we've said, though, that this last budget cycle has required some tough decisions in many different departments and many different areas. The district's priority was then, and will always be, to ensure that programming for students meets their needs to the best of the ability that our budget allows. This was accomplished for this school year. The music program did not see any reductions in programming this year, and no music teacher is teaching more than a regular course load. They did an incredible thing at the end of last school year when they took on the classes of Mr. Lurch. And that is to be commended, and that says everything about that music teacher community, that they were willing to do that. They are not teaching, we would have to approve it on a board. It would be transparent. They would be compensated for extra classes that they would be teaching. That's not happening. We are always looking closely at the budget. As Beth Ann has already said, she's started looking at it already, and we will continue to scrutinize it as much as possible and continue to seek out ways to strengthen and support our music and arts programs, as well as all of the programs for our district. Budgets are really difficult in public schools, and we're doing the best we can to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And I understand that isn't always going to please everybody, and that makes total sense. But we do truly believe that we are doing our best to meet everyone's needs. And as we said before, looking for ways to grow the program and find funding to help to grow that program. No one here is looking to defund anything. That is never the goal. So with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn this evening? And a second?
Second.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Have a good night.
Aye.
Oh, everyone say aye.
Aye.
Aye.